Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Vicky Glass. Vicky Glass was born on September 21, 1979 in Stockton-on-Tees, a small town in the northeast of England, on the banks of the River Tees. She has an older sister named Claire, who is 1 year older. When Vicky was 6 years old, her parents, Deborah and Anthony, decided to divorce. Her mother, Deborah, later married another man named Colin Goodall, and Vicky had a half-sister named Cheryl and a brother named Thomas. Although her parents divorced, they continued to live in Stockton. Vicky developed a passion for music from an early age, becoming a big fan of Michael Jackson and the musical Cats. Between the ages of 13 and 18, she joined a local jazz band and often performed with her friends. After graduating from Blackstone High School, Vicky continued her studies at the academy and earned 5 college degrees. However, her life changed dramatically. At 18, Vicky fell in with a bad group of friends and began her drug addiction. Her illegal activities were mainly in the Cannon Park and Gresham areas of Middleborough, near her home. Her illegal activities were mainly in the Cannon Park and Gresham areas of Middleborough, near her hometown. In 1999, Vicky became homeless and contracted severe pneumonia. During this difficult time, her friend introduced her to a man named Patch Claus. This man provided her with a temporary place to heal. For months, Vicky lived with Patch, who cared for her and provided her with medication. However, this support was not enough to help Vicky escape her addiction and unhealthy lifestyle. On September 23, 2000, a few days after her 21st birthday, Vicky left Patch's house with her friend for the last time. She had initially stayed at Cannon Park in Gresham. Vicky also worked as an escort on Set Road in Middleborough, and they drove to Main Road. Main Road was notorious for escorting and illegal activities. After staying there for a while, Vicky and her client left and hailed a ring taxi. The taxi driver then took them to a man's house in Norton, only 3 blocks away from where they had left. Vicky stayed there once more before hailing another taxi to return to Middleborough. The taxi that picked her up was a white Vauxhall Vectra, registration number 790, at 4 a.m. on Sunday, September 24th. She got out at the intersection of Union Road and Ashwood Square, near a pub called The Colleague. From there, Vicky was only a 5-minute walk to Patch's residence, where she lived with the man. However, she did not return home. Patch became concerned when Vicky did not return and began calling, visiting friends and going to places she frequented, but there was no news of her. After 3 days, he contacted the police, and on September 27th, an investigation into Vicky's disappearance was launched. A week after Vicky went missing, on October 5th, the local paper, the Northern Echo, published an article headlined, "Missing Young Woman." In the article, Vicky was described as being about 5 feet 1 inch tall, with blonde hair tied in a ponytail. She was wearing a white t-shirt, light gray trousers and white trainers. The article also quoted a police officer as saying that Vicky was a known prostitute and frequented hot spots. Vicky's family refused to give up and were determined to find out who was behind the incident. In 2018, the police received additional funding to try to find a criminal. On Friday, November 3rd, a man was walking his dog in the village of Deme, 20 miles southwest of Middleborough. At 6 a.m., he walked past a ditch near the main road in the village and discovered the decomposing, unclothed body parts of a woman. He quickly called the police, who arrived and identified the victim as Vicky Glass, a 21-year-old woman who had gone missing. The cause of her death has not yet been determined. North Yorkshire and Cleveland police immediately began an investigation. A team of 40 police officers were sent to the scene to collect evidence and conduct forensic examinations. However, no traces were found at the scene, and the clothes Vicky was wearing when she went missing were not found. Detective Brian Dan, who is leading the investigation, has appealed to journalists to contact anyone who knew Vicky, spoke to her, and has any information that could help the investigation. As Deme was a popular tourist destination, police appealed to anyone who might have been in the area to contact them. Police noted that the car that brought Vicky to the village may have stopped on the roadside outside the village before entering the village and asked people to be aware of this stop. On November 13, 2000, Vicky's mother Deborah addressed the press appealing for witnesses to her daughter's disappearance. Police placed a picture of Vicky in the pub where she was last reported missing, as well as in other areas of the city where sex workers were known to operate. By November 20th, police had interviewed nearly 500 people and received more than 150 statements. Those interviewed included former clients of Vicky and drivers who used the Cannon Park overnight car park where Vicky and other sex workers often worked. The police laid flowers on her grave where her body was found. They then appealed to the public for any information that might help them find the culprit. Two men in Vicky's family tried to stay calm, appealing for the public's cooperation in the investigation. Meanwhile, Vicky's mother, Deborah, was extremely distraught and could not attend the ceremony. After questioning many people, the police found important information. They said that about 12 prostitutes may have information related to Vicky's disappearance. The police began a more thorough investigation. In March, the police began to closely monitor lorry drivers stopping at Cannon Park car park. Next, the police arrested a 39-year-old man from Grimsby, but he was released on bail and his identity is still kept secret from the public. On January 9, 2002, police arrested a 47-year-old man on suspicion of being involved in Vicky's case. 2 days after his arrest, on January 11th, the man's name was given as Eric Coates. He was a resident of South North Yorkshire and lived about 45 miles south of Middleborough. Eric regularly used the services of prostitutes and was a client of Vicky. This was the third time Eric had been questioned about Vicky's disappearance. Police searched his home, where he lived with his parents. Police said Eric could not provide an alibi for his whereabouts on the day Vicky went missing, although he did mention that he may have been at his home because it was his father's birthday that evening. Eric Coates later gave an interview to the Northern Echo, saying that, according to rumors, Vicky had been murdered over a drug debt and that he did not want anyone else to die like that. He also expressed hope that a criminal would be found. Police found no clear evidence and Eric was released without charge. In July 2002, Cleveland police announced their intention to question another suspect, John Taylor. John had been sentenced to life in prison for the kidnap and murder of 16-year-old Leanne Turner in Leeds, West Yorkshire. He kidnapped Leanne Turner while she was shopping in the city centre on Christmas Eve 2000, took her home and brutally murdered her. Leanne's body was found 9 months later by Cleveland Police Inspector Jim Tate. Policeman Jim Tate told the press about the progress of the investigation, but no further information about John Taylor was available in connection with Vicky's case. To mark the second anniversary of Vicky's death, in September 2002, her mother, Deborah, held a press conference appealing for help from the media. In her heartbreaking speech, she shared the pain she had suffered since losing her child and how she had considered suicide because she could not bear the pain. After a long delay, a further investigation into Vicky's case was launched. However, when this investigation was carried out in August 2003, the results of Vicky's autopsy could not determine the cause of death. This was because Vicky's body had decomposed so badly over time that many of her body parts, including major organs and some bones, were missing. The subsequent investigation also found no signs of injury or abuse to Vicky. Later that year, Vicky's mother, Deborah, and stepfather Colin visited the site in Deme where Vicky's body was found to pay their respects. They were followed by reporters from ITV. In a 20-second video, Deborah can be seen fighting back tears as she says Vicky did not deserve to die like that. Gordon Lamp from Cleveland Police also said that despite 10 years having passed, they would continue to try to find the criminal responsible for Vicky's death. 10 years after Vicky's death on September 24, 2010, her parents spoke to reporters for information and discussed the emotional pain caused by the decade-long hunt for her killer. Her mother, Deborah, said she thinks about Vicky every day and cannot get over her loss. Vicky's mother, Deborah, died in 2015 at the age of 55 and will never know who was responsible for her daughter's death. In 2017, Cleveland police, along with Crime Commissioner Barry Coppinger, applied for special funding from the Home Office to fund the investigation of 3 old criminal cases, including Vicky Glass's case. The story of Vicky Glass, it all started with her disappearance, but the reason why she was killed is still a big question. Currently, the mystery of Vicky's death is still unsolved, and this causes unbearable pain to her family and friends. People continue to search for answers and hope to catch the culprit responsible for Vicky's tragic death, but unfortunately, after all these years, the culprit is still not found. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Mary Catherine Higdon. Mary Catherine Higdon was born in 1994. Mary was a lively and cheerful child who loved making people laugh with her humor, impressions, and playful antics. She had a special bond with her pet frog, which she'd often take on walks around town. Mary was an outdoorsy person who enjoyed exploring nature and appreciating its beauty. She was also passionate about performing, often putting on shows for her family that showcased her creativity and imagination. Her family saw great potential in her and thought she had a bright future ahead. As she grew older, Mary developed a strong interest in firearms. She learned to handle guns responsibly and appreciated their power. She became a skilled marksman and continued to develop her skills. During her high school years, Mary met her partner, Stephen Freeman, who would become the love of her life. Stephen was born on January 1, 1995, in Griffin, Georgia, where he grew up with his parents and brother. He had a happy childhood, surrounded by a loving family and many friends who described him as laid-back, kind, and helpful. Stephen enjoyed spending time outdoors and exploring nature. Stephen was particularly close to his parents, but he shared a special bond with his mother. When she graduated from college after returning to school, Stephen wrote her a heartfelt letter expressing his admiration for her achievement. In the letter, he praised her hard work and determination, saying he looked up to her every day and loved her more than words could say. Stephen had immense respect and appreciation for his mother, which was clear in the way he spoke about her. After meeting in high school, Stephen and Mary Catherine formed a strong bond, united by their passion for outdoor activities like hiking, camping, fishing, and hunting. Their shared love of nature became the foundation of their robust relationship. After graduating from high school, the couple decided to take the next step by moving in together in Griffin, Georgia. Living together in their own space thrilled Mary Catherine and Stephen. What's more, Stephen's mother welcomed Mary Catherine into their family, treating her like a daughter. Every Sunday, the couple would visit Stephen's parents for a big family dinner, a tradition that brought them all closer together and solidified Mary Catherine's place within the family. Stephen's friends were initially hesitant about his relationship with Mary Catherine, but as they got to know her better, they began to appreciate her positive influence on Stephen's life. They saw how happy and joyful she made him, and they admired her enthusiasm for the outdoors. Stephen and Mary Catherine had different occupations. Stephen worked as a metal worker, specializing in roof repairs. Mary Catherine, on the other hand, had 2 part-time jobs. She worked as a teacher's assistant at St. George's Episcopal School, a preschool in Milner, Georgia. Additionally, she was employed at a sporting goods store where she sold guns. Interestingly, one of Stephen's close friends, Thomas Skinner, was also a colleague of Mary Catherine's at the sporting goods shop. Mary Catherine learned about basic gun safety while working at a sporting goods store, which taught her how to properly hold, load, and shoot a gun. Similarly, Stephen was enthusiastic about firearms and owned several shotguns and rifles that he used for hunting and target practice. He also kept a Glock 42 handgun at home for self-protection. After 5 years together, Mary Catherine and Stephen were still living in their apartment in Griffin, Georgia, by the summer of 2018. However, their relationship took a tragic turn on August 1st when Mary Catherine made a distressing 911 call, marking the end of their high school romance. Mary Catherine frantically called the dispatcher, screaming that she had accidentally just shot her boyfriend. The police quickly responded to the emergency call and arrived at the apartment shared by Mary Catherine and Stephen. They found Mary Catherine in a state of panic, crying and hyperventilating as she knelt beside Stephen's motionless body. She repeatedly wailed that she could not lose him, her voice filled with anguish and desperation. As the police carefully moved Mary Catherine away from Stephen, they were able to assess his condition. They discovered that he had been shot in the chest, but miraculously, he was still alive. The police immediately called for an ambulance to rush Stephen to the nearest hospital. At the emergency room, a team of skilled doctors worked to save Stephen's life. Despite their best efforts, his condition continued to worsen. Unfortunately, the severity of his injury ultimately proved fatal, and Stephen succumbed to his wounds. After Stephen was taken to the hospital, Mary Catherine accompanied the police to the station for a formal interview. Mary Catherine explained what happened on the night she accidentally shot Stephen. She said she was giving him the gun because he normally kept it beside his bed for safety. However, she clarified that they never loaded the chamber of their guns at home. During the police questioning, officers detected the smell of alcohol on Mary Catherine's breath. As they pressed her for more information, her story changed. Initially, she said she handed Stephen the gun, but later claimed she tossed it to him. The police was skeptical of her changing story, knowing that a gun wouldn't fire randomly just because it was tossed. Someone had to pull the trigger. The police investigation revealed that Mary Catherine must have been pointing the gun directly at Stephen's body for the bullet to have struck where it did, given the location of his gunshot wound. During her interview, Mary Catherine admitted, "I did it out of anger," but unfortunately, the recording equipment malfunctioned at that exact moment, and her words were inaudible. Despite the missing recording, the police still had strong evidence pointing to Mary Catherine's intention to harm Stephen. At the couple's apartment, they found signs of an intense argument, including scattered food throughout the house. Additionally, police records showed that officers had responded to 5 domestic disturbance calls at the couple's residence in the past year. The police also discovered that the gun used in the shooting was loaded on the night of the incident, contradicting Mary Catherine's claims. These findings collectively led the police to conclude that Mary Catherine had intentionally shot her boyfriend Stephen. The police found cooking grease residue on the gun and magazine, leading them to believe Mary Catherine, who was cooking dinner at the time, had loaded the weapon. After Mary Catherine shot Stephen, the police questioned his friends to learn more about their relationship. According to his friends, Mary Catherine and Stephen's relationship was marked by constant fighting and toxicity. They reported that the couple frequently had intense, heated arguments. Mary Catherine was described as possessive and verbally abusive towards Stephen, with signs of mental instability that heightened the tension between them. Whenever Stephen tried to create distance by leaving their apartment, Mary Catherine would barrage him with relentless texts and calls, forcing him to block her. One of Stephen's friends revealed that Stephen had confided in him about Mary Catherine's history of threatening him with a gun. Specifically, she had pulled a firearm on him at least 3 times in the past. Despite this, Stephen chose not to report these incidents to the authorities because he was worried about Mary Catherine getting into trouble. Stephen's friends stressed that his top priority was always Mary Catherine's well-being, even when it put his own safety at risk. When Stephen's friends learned that Mary Catherine had accidentally shot him, they were skeptical because they knew she was knowledgeable about handling firearms. In fact, just 3 months prior to the shooting, Stephen had texted a friend to say that Mary Catherine was running wild outside, screaming and attempting to shoot both him and herself. Stephen told a friend that Mary Catherine had previously pointed a gun at him, but the latest time, her eyes frightened him, making him think she might actually pull the trigger. By July 2018, Stephen was exhausted with Mary Catherine's behavior and considered leaving her. In July, Stephen planned to secretly move to another town while Mary Catherine was out, without telling her. He was afraid of how she might react if she knew he was leaving. Just 2 days before Mary Catherine fatally shot Stephen, the police found a series of revealing text messages from July 30th. The conversation started with Stephen sending Mary Catherine a friendly message. "Good morning, beautiful. Don't forget." Mary Catherine responded with, "Have a great day." Stephen replied, "You too, love you." However, the night of July 31st, Stephen avoided Mary Catherine's texts and calls, as they were in the middle of a fight, and instead spent the evening at a friend's house. On the night of August 1st, Mary Catherine was at home preparing dinner when she realized Stephen wasn't there. She contacted Stephen's mother, who told her that he was with his friend. Angry and feeling betrayed, Mary Catherine drove to his friend's house, determined to confront Stephen. When she arrived, she saw Stephen sitting in the passenger seat of his friend's truck. Mary Catherine pulled up alongside and began yelling at Stephen, who tried to calm her down, promising to come home soon. Although Stephen's friends claimed that Mary Catherine had pointed a gun at Stephen on multiple occasions, Mary Catherine vigorously denied these allegations. She maintained that she never pulled a gun on Stephen. However, Mary Catherine did admit to having threatened to take her own life with a gun on several occasions. In a later interview, Stephen's mother shared her insight, believing that one of the main reasons Stephen stayed with Mary Catherine for so long was because she frequently threatened to harm herself. Stephen was afraid that Mary Catherine would follow through on her threats if he decided to leave her. However, on the night of the incident that led to Stephen's shooting, Mary Catherine claimed that Stephen was the one who became aggressive and violent. According to her, Stephen threw the dinner she had prepared in her face. Mary Catherine stated that she only picked up the gun to defend herself and scare Stephen away. She wanted him to leave the apartment, but Stephen allegedly lunged at her, which frightened her. As she backed away, the next thing she knew, Stephen was bleeding from the chest. At the time of the shooting, Mary Catherine didn't tell the police her version of events because she was embarrassed to admit that Stephen had a history of violence towards her. She claimed that Stephen had hit her in the past and was controlling. She even recalled an incident where Stephen kicked her out of bed with such force that she hit her head on the door frame. However, Stephen's friends had a different perspective on their relationship. They claimed to have witnessed Mary Catherine being physically aggressive towards Stephen, stating that she had slapped him hard in the face. Mary Catherine's sister contradicted her account of their relationship, revealing that she had seen bruises on Mary Catherine's arm 2 weeks before Stephen was killed. When questioned, Mary Catherine confided in her sister that Stephen had grabbed her, causing the injuries. After investigating Stephen's death as a murder, the authorities charged Mary Catherine with murder, aggravated assault, and firearm possession during a felony. The prosecution offered her a plea deal, proposing a life sentence with possible parole if she pleaded guilty. However, Mary Catherine declined the offer, opting to stand trial and assert her innocence. At the trial, Mary Catherine maintained that she shot Stephen in self-defense, denying the charges against her. The trial, which began on June 17, 2019, nearly a year after Stephen's death, exposed the tumultuous relationship between Mary Catherine and Stephen. Mary Catherine's lawyers argued that she acted out of genuine fear, citing Stephen's history of violence and abuse. Mary Catherine testified that she was the victim of Stephen's controlling, manipulative, and dangerous behavior, which included physical, mental, emotional, verbal, and sexual abuse. She described being hit, humiliated, and degraded by Stephen on multiple occasions, and shared specific incidents where he smacked her around and verbally abused her. Mary Catherine explained that Stephen's constant threats and abuse left her feeling trapped, fearful for her life, and constantly walking on eggshells to avoid triggering his anger. She presented evidence in the form of text messages, including one where Stephen threatened to punish her, which she said meant he would physically harm her. Another text message showed Stephen's explicit threat to hit her back twice as hard if she defended herself. Mary Catherine's defense team also presented messages that supported her allegations of sexual assault, including a text where Stephen mentioned his red room, which she described as a place where they engaged in violent and aggressive intercourse. Mary Catherine testified that Stephen sexually assaulted her on 2 occasions, including one after they returned from a vacation to Walt Disney World, where he allegedly ignored her pleas to stop and intensified his efforts instead. The defense presented over 60 pages of text messages from Stephen, which showcased his pattern of verbal assaults and threatening behavior towards Mary Catherine. These messages included disturbing images and captions, such as one showing Stephen holding a dead fish, accompanied by the caption, "This is you." Another message showed Stephen's violent threats towards Mary Catherine after she cheated on him, where he wrote, "I'm going to wreck you for wrecking me." The defense also alleged that Stephen's drug and alcohol addiction contributed to his violent outbursts. Mary Catherine maintained that she was the one who ended the relationship, not Stephen, and that her actions on the night she shot him were a result of her desperation to escape the abuse. Mary Catherine claimed that Stephen had reacted violently to some news and had threatened to attack her, causing her to defend herself by grabbing a gun. She said the last thing she had told him before shooting was to get out of her house. However, Stephen's friends and family disputed Mary Catherine's allegations, describing Stephen as a friendly and caring person. Stephen's mother said she was unaware of any threatening messages her son had sent Mary Catherine and did not condone such behavior. Although she acknowledged that Stephen may have said some angry things, she believed he did not mean them. In court, the prosecution questioned Mary Catherine about her story, pointing out that she had never reported any alleged abuse by Stephen. They also presented evidence that Mary Catherine had searched for violent and explicit content online just hours before the shooting, which she claimed was to find ways to make Stephen happy. The prosecution argued that Mary Catherine had changed her story about the shooting multiple times, and that a text from Stephen suggested she had pointed a gun at him before. Additionally, Stephen's friends testified that they had witnessed Mary Catherine's violent behavior towards him. After 4 hours of deliberation, the jury found Mary Catherine not guilty of murder, assault, and other charges. The verdict surprised Stephen's loved ones, who felt that justice had not been served. Later, the jurors revealed that they believed Mary Catherine had intentionally killed Stephen, but there was not enough evidence to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. This lack of evidence made it difficult to determine whether the shooting was murder or self-defense. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Christy Wilson. Christy Wilson was born on January 10, 1978, in San Jose, California. She attended Gunderson High School and later earned a business degree from California State University, Chico. Her parents, Debbie Boyd and Patrick Boyd, described her as an exceptional student and athlete. After college, Christy landed a job at a tech company near Sacramento, where she worked until the high-tech crisis led to her job loss. In her free time, she enjoyed playing blackjack at a local casino, where she met her boyfriend, Danny Berlando. Initially, Christie's relationship with Danny was quite harmonious, and her family and friends thought they made a great couple. However, things took a turn for the worse after they moved to Sacramento together. Christie started showing up with bruises, but she wouldn't talk about how she got them. Following her job loss, Christie returned to her parents' home in San Jose. She eventually received a job offer in San Francisco and decided to start fresh. On October 4, 2005, Christie Wilson went to Sacramento to collect her remaining belongings. However, just 2 days later, her boyfriend Danny Burlando contacted her parents to report that she had vanished. He claimed to have searched for her by contacting local jails, hospitals, and friends before reaching out to them. The police were also informed about Christie's disappearance. According to Danny, Christie visited his apartment on October 4th. He then went to dinner with his family, while Christie went to the Thunder Valley Casino. This was the last time he saw her. It's worth noting that Danny's family didn't get along with Christie, which is why he attended the family dinner without her. The tension between their families was due to concerns about Christie's safety. Christie's family had noticed bruises on her body, suggesting that Danny had been physically abusing her. Christie's stepfather, Patrick Boyd, was particularly upset when he found out about the abuse. He wanted to confront Danny, but Christie's mother, Debbie Boyd, intervened to prevent a confrontation. Danny Burlando was 31 years old when Christie disappeared. He had recently lost his job as a car salesman. About a month prior to Christie's disappearance, the police were called to their residence after neighbors reported hearing Christie screaming. Although the police found that they had been arguing, they made up quickly and no further action was taken. When Christie went missing, Danny was the primary suspect due to their previous altercation. His decision to wait nearly 48 hours before reporting her missing to the police raised suspicions that he might have used this time to destroy evidence. However, Danny cooperated fully with the investigation, allowing police to examine his phone records, credit card activity, computer, apartment, and car. Despite being a suspect, no evidence of foul play was found. Danny had an alibi for the time Christie went missing, having attended a family dinner. Before reporting her disappearance, he attempted to contact Christie 78 times, but she did not answer. The police interviewed Christie's friends and family, and reviewed her phone and credit card activities, but found no activity on her bank account since October 4th. Christie's family and the police worked together to find her. They searched the area with dogs, volunteers, and a police helicopter. Her family asked people to share any information they had about Christie's whereabouts. Danny searched for Christie on his own and visited the Thunder Valley Casino. The casino staff couldn't give him any useful information. However, he found Christie's car in the parking lot. The investigators arrived at the casino and confirmed Christie's car was still in the parking lot. This finding caused confusion rather than answers. There were no signs of a fight or other suspicious activities around her car. The big questions were whether Christie left the casino on her own and why her car remained there. Detectives reviewed security footage inside and outside the casino, hoping to understand what had happened. At the same time, the police conducted another search of Christie and Danny's apartment, but it yielded no results. Meanwhile, Christie's stepfather, Patrick, a police officer, organized a search of a nearby river, but nothing was found. The investigation shifted its focus to Thunder Valley Casino, where Christie was last seen. Using her player's card, investigators tracked her movements and discovered that she played blackjack around 11 p.m. The casino's recordings showed Christie sitting at a table with a man, but Danny was nowhere to be seen. The man and Christie appeared to be communicating, congratulating each other on wins and offering comfort when they lost. They spent about 6 hours together at the casino, during which the man was seen putting his hand on Christie's shoulder. Christie had a night of mixed results. She began well, winning and keeping a good count of the cards. However, as the evening progressed, her luck turned, and she started to lose. As she consumed more drinks, Christie became increasingly agitated and lost control. The casino staff eventually asked her to leave, but the man intervened, saying, "Don't worry, I'll take care of this beauty." Shortly after, the man and Christie left the casino together, as captured on camera. During a visit to Thunder Valley, detectives made a significant discovery when casino employees found a mobile phone under a blackjack table. The phone belonged to Christie, and it's possible she had unknowingly dropped it. This development hindered the police's plan to track Christie's location through her phone. Further investigation of the CCTV footage revealed that Christie and a man she had met at the casino left the blackjack table and went to the parking lot 4 minutes later. A white car, later identified as belonging to the man, left the parking lot, while Christie's vehicle remained in place. The detective suspected that Christie might have left with the man in his car. The police needed to determine whether Christie had willingly accompanied the man or if he had forced her into the car. After analyzing players' card data, detectives identified the man as Mario Flavio Garcia, a 53-year-old family man from Auburn with a successful IT career. As the investigation progressed, the detectives discovered that the white car seen in the CCTV footage belonged to Mario Garcia, making him the primary suspect in Christie's disappearance. However, the footage showed that Mario Garcia appeared to be alone in the car when he left the parking lot, and Christie never returned to her vehicle. Mario Garcia had stayed in the parking lot for 3 minutes and 41 seconds, raising questions about what might have occurred between him and Christie during that time. Detectives investigating Mario Garcia's life discovered a stark contrast between his public and private persona. While he was a respected community member and football coach, he also had a dark history. 25 years prior, Mario had been arrested for kidnapping his ex-girlfriend, taking her to a secluded location, and forcing her into a sexual act at gunpoint. Despite the severity of the crime, the case was plea bargained down to assault with a deadly weapon, resulting in a lenient sentence of 18 months probation. This was not the only instance where Mario's caught the attention of police. In another incident, Mario was involved in a tumultuous relationship with Lynette Smith. In 1979, Mario, Lynette, and her mother, Violet Davis, spent Christmas together. After dinner, the three of them got into Lynette's car, which subsequently crashed into a river near Oakland Airport. Mario, the sole survivor, claimed Lynette was driving, but investigators could not confirm this. Violet Davis's body was found in a car, while Lynette's body was not recovered until a week later. The incident was initially believed to be an accident, and no one was charged in connection with the deaths. After collecting the available information, investigators interviewed Mario about Christie Wilson. He maintained he was unaware of her disappearance and stated that they left the casino together, parted ways politely after exchanging goodbyes, and went in different directions. Although he claimed to have headed home immediately, his words couldn't be confirmed or disputed through the casino's CCTV footage. Nonetheless, by reviewing security recordings from surrounding locations, investigators ascertained Mario lied. CCTV evidence outside of the casino caught Mario heading the opposite way of his claimed direction after they were separated. Mario claimed to have gone straight home and fallen asleep at 8:30 a.m. after leaving the casino. However, his wife refused to cooperate with the police, leaving detectives unable to verify his alibi. A review of Mario's cell phone records revealed discrepancies in his story. A call to his wife at 7:51 a.m. was made from a cell tower located far from his house, indicating he did not go home immediately after the casino. Mario also stated that he arrived at work at 9 a.m., but a colleague reported that he was late, arriving around 10 a.m. Further investigation revealed that Mario had scratches on his arm and a bruise under one eye the day after Christie Wilson's disappearance. When questioned, Mario attributed the injuries to a fall from a tree while pruning. However, detectives were skeptical of this explanation, as it is unlikely that someone would prune trees at night. The police asked a forensic expert to examine Mario Garcia's injuries. The expert found that the scratches on Mario's face and body didn't match the kind of injuries you'd get from falling out of a tree. There were 4 parallel scratches on his face, and 3 more on the left side of his chest. This was suspicious because Christy Wilson was right-handed. The police suspected Mario was involved in Christy's disappearance, so they got a search warrant for his car, home, and computer. Mario had claimed he went home after saying goodbye to Christy in the parking lot, but as investigators searched his car, they started to think Christy was probably dead. Mario had tried to clean up his car, washing both the inside and outside, and even throwing away the trunk mat. However, he hadn't been able to get rid of all the evidence. Initially, investigators found a small, unremarkable spot on the car seat that was later confirmed to be blood. However, the sample was not suitable for DNA analysis. Further examination of the vehicle revealed 2 long hairs and small blood splatters on the back door of the trunk. The hairs were matched to the missing person, Christy. Further examination of the bloodstains showed that they contained DNA from both Mario and Christy, which disagreed with Mario's statement that he and Christy had separated in the parking lot. This evidence suggested a physical altercation between Mario and Christy. A review of Mario's search history showed that he had been researching forensic toxicology and visiting websites that described how to secretly administer drugs to someone's drink on a date. This led investigators to suspect that Christy may have been a random victim who was targeted by Mario after they sat together at a table. It was possible that Mario had spiked her drink. To prove this, the police needed to find Christy's body. A thorough search of Garcia's 5-acre property was conducted, but unfortunately, no new leads were discovered. Mario Garcia was arrested and charged with kidnapping and murder despite the absence of Christy Wilson's body. He maintained his innocence throughout the trial, which began on September 11, 2006. Prosecutors presented evidence suggesting that Mario had met Christy at a blackjack table, left the casino with her, attacked and killed her, and then hid her body. During the trial, Mario questioned the validity of the evidence, pointing out that only Christy's DNA was found on his car door, while the DNA of his family members and others who had been in the car was not detected. He suggested that the police had planted Christy's DNA as evidence. Mario stated to the court that he would not request leniency or pardon, claiming that he was innocent and did not commit the crime. However, the jury found him guilty on January 11, 2007, and he was sentenced to 59 years to life in prison. After the sentencing, Christy's family held out hope that Mario Garcia would finally reveal the location of her body. However, he refused to cooperate. As the years went by, the family struggled to move on with their lives, which had been forever changed by the traumatic experience. Mario's repeated appeals only added to their distress, despite being unsuccessful. The ongoing appeals prevented the family from finding closure and moving on with their lives. In 2018, Mario offered to provide information about Christy's body in exchange for an early release from prison. However, Christy's mother, Debbie Boyd, was unwilling to negotiate with him. She felt that using her daughter's body as a bargaining chip would be unacceptable. The police then turned to Mario's family for assistance, knowing that his ex-wife, Jean, had divorced him after his imprisonment. Jean eventually lost faith in her ex-husband and began to suspect that he was involved in Christy's disappearance and death. As part of their investigation, police spoke with Mario Garcia's sons, Chris and Andy, asking them to recall any details about the days surrounding Christy's disappearance and their father's subsequent arrest. The police were particularly interested in learning about any changes in Mario's behavior during that time. Chris remembered that he had a football game around that time and saw his father working frantically on a tractor on their plot. Mario's eyes had a wild, frantic look that caught Chris off guard. When Chris asked his father to attend his game, Mario firmly refused, saying he's not going. This response struck Chris as out of character for his father. At the request of investigators, Chris accompanied them to his childhood home. Chris showed them the exact location where he had seen his father working on the tractor, which was next to a detached garage near the road, approximately 100 yards from the Mario residence. It became clear that Mario had made a significant effort to conceal any evidence, taking advantage of the 4 or 5 days he had to cover his tracks. Notably, police had previously searched the Mario property with police dogs in 2005, but had found nothing at the time. In a new development, investigators took a different approach in August 2020. They hired a company that specializes in ground-penetrating radar technology to scan the 5-acre property owned by Mario Garcia. The technicians identified 8 potential locations with voids or pockets beneath the surface. After digging at the first 2 sites, they found nothing. However, at the 3rd location, which was the same spot where Mario Garcia had been digging with a tractor, the police discovered a skeleton. Further examination confirmed that the remains belonged to Christy Wilson, 15 years after she went missing. Although the exact cause of Christy's death remains unknown, experts determined that she had suffered a broken arm and nose. The investigators, who had been working on the case for 15 years, traveled to Arizona to personally inform Christy's mother, Debbie Boyd, about the discovery. The news brought a mix of sadness and relief to Christy's family, who could finally find closure and say goodbye to their daughter. Placer County Sheriff Devin Bell announced that Christy Wilson's case has been solved, thanks to efforts by his team. This was achieved without the cooperation of Mario Garcia, a convicted murderer who is currently in prison. Mario, 67, had refused to provide any information to help the family find closure. According to Christy's mother, Debbie Boyd, this news brings her family peace and marks the end of a painful chapter. She praised the perseverance of the police and thanked them for their tireless efforts. Notably, Mario had died of pneumonia in 2020, but even his death had brought some peace to the family. Mario had never pleaded guilty to any involvement in Christy's disappearance, despite her remains being found on Mario's plot in 2005. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Lin family. Min Lin and Yun Lin's romance began in the late 1980s when they met at an Australian university. They both came from China and had moved to Australia to further their studies. Min had completed her bachelor's degree and was doing an internship, while Yun participated in a student exchange program. They met each other after meeting accidentally in the university hallway. After graduating, they got married and settled in North Epping, Sydney, where their love continued to grow into a strong, close-knit family. Min and Yun had their first child, Brenda Lin, in August 1994. She was mostly known as Brenda. Their son, Henry, was born in 1997, and their youngest child, Terry, was born in 2000. At the start of the 2000s, Min and Yun decided to start a business, opening a small newsroom. Through their hard work, it became a successful news agency with a publishing arm on Rose Street. The Lin family's business success had brought them economic security. A spacious house, a luxury car, and good education for their children. Min had handled business affairs, while Yun had focused on taking care of their home and children. Neighbors had respected the Lin family for their hard work and kindness. As parents, Min and Yun had been appreciated for their care and love for their children. They had never quarreled, their children had been very obedient and close-knit. Brenda, the eldest daughter, had stood out for her beauty, good academic performance, and kindness towards animals. Henry and Terry, 2 sons, had been both active and loved sports, especially soccer. As the Lin family had settled into life in Australia and their assets had increased, they had begun bringing relatives from China to live with them. In the early 2000s, Min's parents had been the first to move to North Epping and had helped with childcare. A few years later, Yun's parents also moved to Sydney suburb, with Min and Yun buying them a small house. Yun's sister, Irene, came to live with the Lin family, assisting with household chores and the children. By this time, the Lin family business was generating substantial income, reportedly nearing $1 million annually. In late 2007, Min Lin's younger sister, Kathy, and her husband, Robert, moved to Australia in search of better opportunities. They had visited before and briefly lived in Melbourne but had returned to China. This time, they were determined to settle in Australia for good. Robert was a former successful ear, nose, and throat doctor in China, decided to try his hand at entrepreneurship. He and his wife invested all their savings in a restaurant in Sydney, but the business struggled and eventually closed. Robert's subsequent attempts to open a cafe or snack bar also failed due to his lack of business skills and financial management experience. Lin's family had a habit of meeting every Friday night. Their last family gathering took place on July 17, 2009, at Kathy and Min's parents' home. The next morning, July 18, the Lin family's store had not been open, making longtime customers feel surprised and confused. This sudden closure had raised their concerns. One of them tried to contact Min multiple times but was unsuccessful, so they called Min's sister Kathy to see if she knew what was going on. Kathy was surprised and worried because her brother never closed the shop without making arrangements first. Kathy tried to call Min and Yun, but they didn't answer. She also tried calling their home phone, but no one picked up. Kathy and her husband Robert were worried, so they decided to visit Min's house to make sure everything was okay. They arrived around 9 a.m. and saw the family car. They went to the house. The front door was unlocked, but there was no sign of Min or his family inside. Kathy went upstairs. When she opened the bedroom door, she was shocked by what she saw. The room was covered in blood, including the floor, walls, ceiling, furniture, and curtains. Yun Lin's body was on the floor near the bed, and she had been severely mutilated. Kathy screamed and stumbled backward, was shocked by the gruesome scene. In the room next to where Irene slept, a terrible scene took place. Irene lay motionless on the bed, her face beaten and bruised. The bedrooms of Henry, 12, and Terry, 9, also revealed horrifying scenes. Both were brutally beaten to death. Their bodies were found in separate corners of the room. Min Lin's body was found in his bedroom, covered with a blanket soaked in blood. He was killed in the same way as his family. It seems he was the first victim, followed by his wife, her sister, and then the two boys. Kathy immediately contacted emergency services. After Kathy's urgent call, Robert left to fetch the Lin's parents, who lived about 10 kilometers from the crime scene. Police and paramedics arrived quickly, encountering what they described as one of the most horrific crime scenes they had witnessed. Tragically, the Lin family members were all killed. Each person died from multiple blows to the head with a heavy blunt object similar to a hammer. However, the crime weapon was not found at the scene. The initial examination of the crime scene did not reveal any important clues. The killer did not leave the murder weapon behind, and they did not take any valuables or money. This suggests that the main goal was to kill the Lin family, not to steal from them. At first, investigators thought there might be multiple attackers because it seemed unlikely that one person could overpower so many people. However, evidence showed that the children were awake during the attack and tried to escape. There were blood stains and splatters throughout the house. Oddly, all adult victims had head injuries and showed signs of strangulation. Investigators found identical bloody shoe prints in each room with a tread pattern. Although they could not identify the shoe brand, they determined the shoe size. no fingerprints were found, suggesting the killers wore gloves. Initially, the police had no leads or theories about the perpetrator's identity. Friends and neighbors of the Lynn family all said that the family had no known enemies, making the motive for the brutal massacre unclear. The attack occurred between midnight and 3 a.m. on July 18th. Brenda Lynn, the eldest child and now sole survivor of the Lynn family, was attending school in New Caledonia at the time of the tragedy. She learned about the incident through social media and initially did not believe it was related to her family, but the truth devastated her. Brenda soon received the call from her Aunt Kathy, who tearfully confirmed the devastating news. Brenda was immediately flown back to Sydney, where Kathy and Robert met her at the airport. She then moved in with them, as her family's home was closed off as a crime scene. The following day, Brenda was taken to the police station, overcome with grief, to be questioned. However, she had no new information to share, stressing that her family had no enemies and hadn't noticed anything unusual before her trip. After her family's passing, Brenda inherited a significant fortune, including property and the family business. Since she was still a minor and in school, her guardians, Kathy and Robert, took on the responsibility of managing the estate. Brenda's grandparents offered their support, but Kathy and Robert insisted on being her caregivers. Robert even threatened to take legal action if the grandparents sought custody, claiming they were too old to care for a teenager. The matter was eventually resolved, with Brenda remaining in the care of her aunt and uncle. The Lynn's shop and publishing business reopened under new management after a temporary closure. However, Brenda had not yet taken over the business operations. Robert began reviewing the family's financial records, including bank accounts, savings, and real estate. Beside that, experts thoroughly investigated the crime scene, documenting every detail, but no concrete leads were found. They believed the killer acted alone and entered the house quietly, possibly through and with a key. The killer wore size 9.5 shoes with a distinctive tread pattern and likely used a hammer as the lethal weapon, which was never found. The killer wore gloves, leaving no fingerprints or foreign DNA behind. One notable detail was the presence of blood stains on the doorknobs of each bedroom where the killings occurred, indicating the killer's bloodied gloves had touched them. However, there were no blood stains on Brenda's room doorknob, suggesting the killer knew she was not present. The Lynn family tragedy received extensive media coverage. However, with no concrete evidence or suspects, numerous implausible theories surfaced. Speculation about the family's supposed vast wealth leading to their murder. As the investigation had stalled, no suspects had emerged for the probe. The theory of a robbery had eventually been abandoned because the killer had left money and valuables intact, suggesting the sole motive had been to kill family members. Furthermore, the fact that the house had lost power on the night of the murder suggested that the murderer had been someone who was familiar with the location of the electrical panel. The attacker's ability to control the house in darkness showed that he had prior knowledge of the house's layout. When reviewing the case, an investigator replayed Kathy's emergency call looking for missed clues. An important hint was detected in the recording. The recording captured Kathy's frantic attempts to explain the situation, her words interrupted by crying and sobbing. At the end of the call, Kathy mentioned her husband's name and talked to him in Cantonese. This piqued the investigators' interest, causing them to translate her words. The translation revealed that Kathy was pleading with Robert not to leave Kathy home alone. This was significant since Robert had left Kathy at the scene of the crime to pick up her parents, despite the potential danger. With 5 people brutally murdered and the killer possibly still inside, Robert's calm aroused suspicion, as if he already knew for certain that Kathy was safe. The police finally identified Robert as the main suspect. A crucial discovery was that Robert had a key to Min's house, which had been given to Robert shortly before the tragedy. However, Robert never mentioned this during questioning, and his wife Kathy was unaware that Min had given him the key. It was Brenda who unintentionally revealed this important information to investigators. Further investigation showed that Robert's claim of being a successful ear, nose, and throat doctor was false. Although he had a medical degree, he had never had a stable job in the field. There were rumors that he had fled to Australia to avoid punishment for alleged bribery charges in China. In Australia, Robert failed to establish a successful career and wasted his remaining savings on unsuccessful business ventures. After moving to North Keeping, he became idle, relying on his wife's income. Once the guardianship papers for Brenda were finalized, Robert acted as if he had inherited the Lin family's estate. His first move was to force Yun's parents out of their home, which Min had bought for them. Although the house remained in Min's name, Min and Kathy's parents were still allowed to stay in their own home that was also purchased for them. Based on this information, investigators suspected he had a long-standing plot to usurp Min family property, money, and profitable business. However, the police could not arrest Robert yet due to a lack of concrete evidence. Through a combination of interrogation, surveillance, and other methods, the investigation team was granted permission to install hidden cameras in the Robert household. They hoped to gather the evidence needed to prove Robert's guilt. The breakthrough came sooner than expected, starting with an unexpected revelation from Kathy during an interrogation. Kathy mentioned Robert's preference for a specific brand of shoes. A few years ago, Robert bought 2 pairs of limited edition sneakers that he really liked. He had worn out one pair and thrown it away, but kept the other pair at home. What's important to note is that Robert's shoe size, 9.5, matched the size of the shoes worn by the killers. The crucial evidence was caught on a hidden camera, which showed Robert deliberately destroying the box that held the remaining pair of shoes. A search warrant was issued for Robert's home. During the search, police found a new pair of size 9.5 sneakers with the same pattern as the pattern collected at the crime scene. In the garage, they discovered a small bloodstain, which was later confirmed by a forensic examiner to be a bloodstain containing DNA from all 5 victims of the Lin family, linking it to the crime scene. In May 2011, 2 years after the tragedy, Robert was officially arrested. He denied involvement, claiming the blood stains in his garage appeared after returning from Lin's house following the tragedy. He also downplayed the importance of the sneakers, saying they were new and he threw away the old shoes. While in prison awaiting trial, Robert shared a cell with a number of informants whom the police had arranged. During a conversation, he confessed to carefully planning the crime and covering his tracks. He bought the weapon in a store without surveillance cameras and gave his wife tea so she wouldn't wake up while he was committing the crime. He removed the hammer, shoes, gloves, and clothes so police would never find them. At trial, Robert denied everything. The only evidence against him is what the informants said and some indirectly clues. The jury failed to find Robert guilty and he was released on bail in December 2015. But when the trial resumed in June 2016, another informant said Robert had confessed to being haunted by Brenda since she was 13 years old. Brenda was questioned again and tearfully said Robert forced her to have sex when she first moved in. She kept silent about the abuse for years because she was afraid of what Robert might do. With this new information and other evidence, Robert was officially convicted of all charges. He was given 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, 1 for each murder. All of his appeals were rejected. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Nicole Lobby. Nicole Lobby, 29 years old, lives with her husband Chris and has a large family in Oregon, USA. Nicole was a beautiful woman, loving wife, amazing mother, and a friend. She was not afraid to share her faith or her opinion with anyone. Her goal was to make sure that she left this world a better place. When Nicole met Chris, she already had an older daughter. Chris also had 2 daughters, and after they got married, they had a son. Nicole is known for being adventurous, brave, and always looking forward. She overcame a rare cancer and then became very passionate about fitness. Nicole's goal is to become a fitness trainer. Nicole recently started a new job, and no one thought she would be in danger at work. At about 5 p.m. on August 19, 2014, Portland Emergency Services received a call from a man reporting that a woman had been stabbed in the chest. The victim was still alive but had difficulty breathing. So the witness requested that an ambulance be sent to Timber Creek Apartments as soon as possible. Police quickly arrived and spoke with the man who called 911, who gave more details about the incident. He said he and his wife were walking down the stairs of their apartment building to the parking lot when they heard screaming. He turned to his right and saw a woman running toward them, screaming, "He stabbed me, he stabbed me." She told the couple she didn't know the attacker, but he was wearing camouflage pants and a black hoodie. The manager of Timber Creek Apartments identified the victim as Nicole Lobby, 29, a coworker. Nicole was a leasing consultant and had been working there for several weeks. On August 19, during her work hours, she drove a trolley around the complex delivering letters asking for lease renewals. Along with each letter, Nicole gave each resident a balloon tied to a bag of popcorn. When she was done, she marked each apartment on a map in the trolley. Based on Nicole's notes and the map, detectives determined that the attack may have occurred on a specific stairwell in Timber Creek at the time residents heard Nicole screaming. The attacker may have been waiting for her under this stairwell. There was also a trail of blood from the stairwell and flyers scattered at the bottom of the stairs. During the Washington County Sheriff's Office investigation, several witnesses reported seeing a suspicious young man wearing a black hoodie and camouflage pants near Timber Creek at the time of the attack. Combining the reports and the timing of the sightings, detectives determined the suspect's route through Timber Creek. More than 20 officers were involved in this intensive investigation, assisted by canine dogs. The Washington County Search and Rescue Team searched the woods along Cedar Mill Creek, a stream that runs through the Timber Creek residence. During the search, they found several items that were sent to a lab for analysis. Detectives did not disclose the exact findings but said they were investigating every possibility. Investigators are trying to figure out what caused the attack, which took place in broad daylight at an apartment complex with more than 1,000 residents. They have contacted Nicole's husband, Chris Lobby, and informed him of the incident. The police took several steps to identify the attacker. It was not a robbery, and the attacker did not attempt to remove her clothing. This suggested that the motive for the murder might have been a personal dispute. This theory led detectives to her husband, Chris. Chris cooperated with the police and answered questions about his 4-year marriage to Nicole. Investigations revealed that he was at daycare picking up his son at the time of the attack. Therefore, Chris could not have been the attacker. Meanwhile, while interviewing residents at Timber Creek Apartments, the police found 2 more witnesses who saw a man wearing a black hoodie and orange pants. They saw this man, who had similar features to the suspect, running across the street without looking back. Around the same time the attack on Nicole took place, a hooded man was seen running toward the houses across from Timber Creek Apartments. Detectives, working with witnesses, drew up a sketch of the suspect and quickly circulated it throughout the city, even appearing on television news. The city urged anyone who recognized the familiar facial features to report the incident. Detectives also worked with informants to find clues about the killer. The sketch led to several leads. A man said his son knew a man who matched the sketch. His name was Taylor, and he had recently threatened others with a knife. Police found Taylor and brought him in for questioning. Taylor said strange things and seemed to have mental problems. When asked about Nicole, he did not hesitate to admit that he had killed her. However, Taylor's testimony was inconsistent, as he only mentioned information that had already been in the newspaper and gave irrelevant details. As a result, the police eliminated him as a suspect. After the sketch of the suspect appeared in the newspaper, the police received a tip about a man named Nick who had a criminal history. Nick looked similar to the suspect in the sketch. However, he had never done anything similar to what happened to Nicole. He had run-ins with the law before, but he had never physically harmed anyone. The police interviewed Nick and found his behavior disturbing. When asked about Nicole and the crime, he denied any involvement and asked for a lawyer. The police then obtained a search warrant for Nick's home. They found a black hoodie and orange pants, but the hoodie did not match the witness description because it had a bright white logo on the front. Nick's clothes were sent for analysis, but no evidence was found linking him to the crime. Nick's phone records also showed that he was not near the scene of the attack. As a result, the police eliminated Nick as a suspect, and the case went cold. Nicole's family is going through a very difficult time. In an interview with reporters, Chris Lobby shared that he can't stop thinking about what happened to Nicole. He said, "The hard thing is that there are so many unanswered questions. I keep thinking about what happened, different scenarios, and there are no answers to any of them." The police were concerned that the perpetrator might strike again, and their worries became a reality. 3 weeks after Nicole's death, on September 13, 2014, the Eugene Police Department received an alarming call. Eugene is a city about 100 miles from Portland. On that day, a resident was attacked while leaving a bar near Autzen Stadium. Heather Miller, 39, had gone to a bar near the stadium to watch the game. Around 8 p.m., when the game ended, Heather decided to go home. The streets were almost deserted. As she left the bar, she tried to call a taxi but realized her phone was dead. So she decided to walk closer to the stadium to catch one more easily. As she walked along the sidewalk, she noticed someone following her. As she crossed the street and turned around, she saw the man behind her was still following her. She walked faster but was suddenly hit in the back of the head, knocking her unconscious. When she woke up, she found herself face to face with her attacker, who had pulled down her pants in an attempt to sexually assault her. Heather tried to reason with her attacker. She said she had a daughter and begged to see her again, but he continued to beat her. Heather described that every time she spoke, she was punched in the face. Eventually, Heather realized that the only way to survive was to pretend to be dead. She closed her eyes and remained silent. When the attacker thought he had achieved his goal, he ran away. Despite the brutal beating, Heather found the strength to stand up and go out into the street. A minute later, a car stopped and the driver called 911. An ambulance arrived and rushed her to the hospital. Heather regained consciousness and spoke to a detective who arrived shortly afterward. At this time, neither of them knew that the attacker had been arrested at the police station. There was a park near the scene of the attack. A police officer on duty that night saw a man running, stopped him, and saw that his hands and shoes were bloody. The police arrested him and called a patrol car to take him to the station. Jamie Tinoco, 17, was young but had been noticed by the police many times. At the time of his arrest, he was on probation for illegal possession. Jamie had been using drugs since he was 12, and his parents had no control over him. Jamie had dropped out of high school since his freshman year and was arrested for driving without a license the day before the attack on Heather but was released shortly after. During questioning, Jamie confessed to attacking Heather. The man was completely calm and nonchalant, believing he had done nothing wrong. His actions led the Eugene Police Department to suspect that Heather was not his first victim. Police released his photo, hoping that other women affected by him would come forward. Soon after, detectives investigating Nicole Lobby's death saw a photo of Jamie released by Eugene police. They believed Jamie matched the sketch of the suspect they had. Further investigation revealed that Jamie lived with his parents in Portland and that their apartment was across the street from Timber Creek, which further fueled their suspicions that he was involved in Nicole Lobby's death. Detectives questioned Jamie about Nicole's case, hoping that he would admit to assaulting her, as he had confessed to attacking Heather Miller. However, Jamie insisted that he had nothing to do with Nicole's death and refused to answer questions. Police needed to find evidence to link him to Nicole Lobby's death. As mentioned earlier, Jamie lived across the street from his parents at Timber Creek Apartments. As a result, the police obtained a search warrant for his parents' apartment. They found a black hoodie and orange pants in Jamie's room and sent them to a lab for analysis. However, the lab results were disappointing, with no trace of Nicole's DNA on any of Jamie's belongings, and the investigation seemed to hit a dead end. While there is no evidence to prove that Jamie killed Nicole, there is enough evidence to link him to the attack on Heather Miller. He did not deny his actions and seemed proud of being a young thug. At his trial in connection with the attack on Heather Miller, he smiled and said he had no remorse for his actions. Jamie had broken away from a group of delinquent teens on a trip supervised by the Washington County Juvenile Department. He followed Heather, attacked her from behind, and dragged her into the bushes near Atson Stadium. Heather said she still has nightmares and flashbacks and chipped her front teeth after the attack. She has had to find a new job. The injuries she suffered in the attack, including a broken nose, required reconstructive surgery to recover. "There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about what happened," she said in Lane County District Court. "I pray that Jamie will never have the opportunity to do this to another person and impact their life the way he impacted mine." Heather Miller held hands with two family members as she sat with more than a dozen supporters before reading her statement aloud. Jamie grinned in court as the victim recounted the horrifying details of the attack she endured. When the judge asked why Jamie was smiling, he replied that he did not know. The judge called Jamie's lack of remorse appalling and labeled him a danger to the community, then imposed the maximum sentence. Heather, comforted by friends and family after the hearing, said, "His behavior was disrespectful and unrepentant, and the judge's sentence was fully deserved." A courageous mother of two, Heather pleaded with the judge that Jamie would never have the opportunity to harm another person. She did not want him to think he had won and brought her down. So she kept her composure from the start. Although the defense tried to portray Jamie as a young man who had been affected by substance abuse for years, the judge noted that his behavior in court clearly reflected character issues. Jamie's lawyer asked the judge to sentence his client to 8 years and 4 months in prison, arguing that Jamie was remorseful for what he had done. However, Jamie did not apologize when the judge allowed him to speak. He refused to make any statements. Judge Deborah Vogt sentenced Jamie to 14 years and 2 months in prison, explaining that his lack of remorse justified the harsh sentence. "The community needs to be protected from a dangerous man like this," she said. "As much as people want me to see him as a boy, I can't." When Jamie becomes eligible for release, he will be in his early 30s and will have to register as a sex offender for the rest of his life. As for Heather, her family said she is looking forward to starting a new job and being able to move on with her life. Meanwhile, investigators decided to take advantage of Jamie's ego to get him to confess. They questioned him about Nicole Lobby's death. The detectives told him that he would get more respect in prison if the other inmates knew that he was not only the coward who attacked one woman from behind but also the one who killed another. After a few minutes of silence, Jamie began talking about Nicole, saying that he didn't mean to kill her. He wanted to feel the sensation of stabbing someone, but he didn't mean to kill Nicole, just hurt her. He said that when he was walking from his apartment to Timber Creek, he saw Nicole park her car and bring a balloon to her second-floor apartment. As Nicole climbed the stairs, He hid behind the car, then ran up the stairs and stabbed Nicole when she turned around. Deme said he chose Nicole because he thought she would be an easy target. When asked if he would try to force Nicole to have sex, like he did with Heather Miller, he casually replied, "Oh, I've thought about it. I would." Deme said he didn't do it because Nicole screamed when she stabbed him, so he ran away during the reenactment. Deme showed investigators how he escaped the scene. Chris Lobby said he was shocked to learn that his wife's killer was only 17. "I have a 13-year-old daughter," he said. "It's unbelievable and hard to understand that someone 4 years older than her could do this." The trial began in 2015. Despite confessing under questioning, Deme has pleaded not guilty in court. His attorney argued that there was no DNA evidence linking him to the scene. "I'm just asking for leniency for a 17-year-old boy with a serious mental illness who has the potential to change with treatment," defense attorney Robert Axford said. The defense's only witness was a psychologist who evaluated Deme and determined he had symptoms of schizophrenia. However, a psychologist at Oregon State Hospital determined that Deme had a personality disorder, not schizophrenia. His video confession and reenactment convinced the jury of Dame's guilt. During his reenactment, he described details that only Nicole Lobby's attacker would know. During the sentencing phase, the jury had two options: life in prison without parole or life in prison with the possibility of parole in 30 years. The jury determined that there were no mitigating circumstances sufficient to impose a life sentence with the possibility of parole in 30 years. As a result, in 2017, Deme Tinoco was found guilty on all counts. Deme, then 20, stood in the Washington County courtroom between his two attorneys when Court of Appeals Judge Kirsten Thompson asked him if he had anything to say before she formally sentenced him to life in prison without parole. He put his hands down in front of his waistband, his mouth twitching slightly. "I beg for forgiveness," Deme said before sitting down. Chris Lobby, Nicole's husband, said Dame's family came to see his family after the sentencing to express their condolences and apologize. But that's not the end of the story. In 2021, the Oregon Court of Appeals overturned Dame's 2017 conviction. Juvenile law has changed since Tinoco was tried on a Measure 11 charge. Under the new reform, offenders between the ages of 15 and 17 are no longer automatically sent to adult court. The new law requires prosecutors to hold a hearing to decide whether juveniles charged with serious crimes should be transferred to adult court. If the case is retried, Dame's attorneys could ask for a lighter sentence. The decision to overturn the conviction came as a shock to Nicole Lobby's family, who were not expecting it. Nicole's father, Rich Jones, said they will have to go through another emotional ordeal. Deme remains in prison, but this is not the end of Nicole Lobby's case. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Suzanne Morphew. Suzanne Morphew was born on April 11, 1971, to Jean and Adrian Alexandria, and grew up with her two brothers, David and Andrew. Those who knew Suzanne describe her as an intelligent, thoughtful, and caring friend. In 1998, while in high school, she met her future husband, Barry Morphew. After 6 years of dating, they got married. Barry was an exceptional baseball player and was signed with the Toronto Blue Jays. Meanwhile, Suzanne pursued a degree in education at Purdue University. However, Barry's sports career was cut short due to a serious injury, and he switched to a career in horticulture. Suzanne had been teaching for 4 years when Barry started his landscape company, which gradually gained momentum. The couple had 2 children, Mallory and Macy. They lived a picture-perfect life in Indiana until Suzanne was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. Despite beating cancer twice, in 2018, the Morphew family decided to move to Mayville, Colorado, for a fresh start and to be closer to their daughter Mallory, who attended Western State University. They settled into a stunning 7-acre property where Barry could hunt and continue his work as a contractor. He also became a volunteer firefighter. Suzanne retired from teaching and dedicated more time to her church and her new hobby, sports mountain biking. The Morphew family seemed perfect from the outside, but they had their secrets. It wasn't until May 10, 2020, that their problems came to light. That Mother's Day started off like any other at the Morphew residence. Barry and their daughters left the house, leaving Suzanne alone. Barry claimed he had a landscaping appointment in Broomfield, 3 hours away from Mayville by car. Meanwhile, the girls went on a camping trip. Barry and the girls planned to return home that evening to celebrate Mother's Day with Suzanne. However, when they didn't hear back from her, they started to worry. The girls sent her a message to wish her a happy Mother's Day, but got no response. This was unusual, since Suzanne was very active on social media. They expected her to be on her phone, especially since she was supposed to attend her best friend's daughter's wedding and share some photos. After several hours of no response, Mallory and Macy grew concerned and asked their neighbor, Martin Ritter, and his wife to check on Suzanne. Mrs. Ritter went to the Morphew house between 4 and 4:30 p.m. and found it empty. Barry's wife called him to explain the situation, and he advised her to check if Suzanne's mountain bike was still at the Morphew residence. If it wasn't there, he told her to contact the police, which is exactly what she did. The police arrived at the Morphew residence, and Barry, along with his 2 daughters, returned home, eager to learn about Suzanne's whereabouts and condition. A few hours into the search, the police discovered their first significant lead. 2 deputies found Suzanne's mountain bike near a steep ravine, not far from the Murphys' home. This suggested that Suzanne might have been involved in a crash. However, there were no signs of a struggle on the bike or in the surrounding vegetation, and no skid marks indicating that she had used her brakes. Despite the mountain bike being found at the bottom of a ravine with no damage, and no signs of struggle or disturbance to the surrounding vegetation, detectives suspected foul play. When presented with this evidence, Barry's reaction was unusual, and his subsequent explanation, that a mountain lion must have moved the bike, seemed far-fetched. Many people found Barry's behavior during the investigation into his wife's disappearance to be suspicious. In a private conversation with YouTuber Tyson Draper, Barry elaborated on his mountain lion theory. Notably, he was absent from the search parties organized by Suzanne's brother, Andrew, who was skeptical of Barry's account of the bike ride and suggested that Suzanne might have gone missing on May 9th instead of Mother's Day. As the investigation continued, suspicion shifted to Barry when Suzanne's helmet was discovered 1 mile from their home, precisely in the direction his truck's telemetry showed he had driven that morning. This discovery was particularly incriminating because it was in the opposite direction of the Broomfield construction site, which was his alleged destination that day. During the initial police interview, the suspect claimed he woke up to his alarm clock at 4:30 a.m. and drove directly to the Broomfield construction site. However, the telematic data from his Ford F-350 revealed that he drove 1 mile west before heading to the site. When confronted with this discrepancy, the suspect provided an explanation. He stated that he had gone scouting for elk that morning around 4:30 a.m. and was curious to see which direction they were headed so he could track them down later. He allegedly had a habit of tranquilizing elk and removing their antlers for sale. But when the officers questioned how he could have spotted elk at 4:30 a.m. if he was just waking up, he changed his story. He claimed he didn't set his alarm for 4:30 a.m. and woke up on his own. When questioned about the day of the disappearance, he stated it was one of the best days the couple had had in a while. He said he worked with a coworker in Salita that morning, returned early, went for a hike with Susan, and then they grilled steak and were intimate together. Barry claimed that he and his wife Suzanne went to bed together, suggesting it might have been the last time they saw each other. However, as we've established, Barry is not a trustworthy witness. When the police investigated, they discovered that Barry had lied about almost everything that occurred that night. The first indication that something was amiss came when investigators reviewed Barry's phone and vehicle data on May 9, 2020. Although Barry and Suzanne did spend the afternoon and evening together, the events didn't match Barry's story. The first significant discrepancy arose between 2:42 and 2:44. Phone records showed Barry making erratic movements around the property. When questioned, Barry claimed he was likely hunting chipmunks with tranquilizers at 2:47 p.m. Then, Barry turned his phone to airplane mode, which remained active until 10:17 p.m. Furthermore, the steak dinner he claimed to have shared with his wife was called into question when investigators found only one dirty dish instead of two. Later that night, more peculiarities emerged on the Morphew property. During their examination of the data, the police found several concerning details that raised suspicions about Barry's activities later that night. At 9:30 p.m., an hour after he claimed to have gone to sleep with his wife, his car was seen reversing backward from the driveway, moving 96 feet. Investigators thought this might be when he loaded her body onto his truck, if he was guilty. The records also showed that between 3:25 and 3:48, the door to his truck opened and closed over 80 times. Although this evidence was circumstantial, it suggested that Barry was not telling the police everything, prompting a closer investigation into the events of May 10th. Further investigation revealed that Barry had no legitimate reason to be in Broomfield that day. His company's contract was not set to start until a week later, so there was no project for him to inspect. Barry claimed that he had only visited the Holiday Inn, the job site, a local store for granola and water, and briefly stopped at McDonald's to clean his windshield. However, surveillance footage obtained by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation contradicted his account. Barry was caught on camera throwing away 5 trash bags near McDonald's and the Holiday Inn. When questioned about it, he gave a suspicious explanation, claiming he was trying to avoid waste disposal fees by cleaning his car himself. However, when officers inspected his car, his story fell apart. A co-worker reported a strong smell of bleach and chlorine in Barry's hotel room a day after Suzanne disappeared. Additionally, investigators found that Barry had changed his clothes multiple times that day. Despite these suspicious actions, the investigators initially found no clear motive for Barry's behavior. But when they dug deeper into their personal lives, they discovered a motive. Barry and Suzanne's daughter revealed that the couple's marriage was not as happy as Barry made it out to be. Text messages on Suzanne's recovered phone and personal belongings proved this. In fact, Suzanne was extremely unhappy in the marriage and talked about how Barry refused to consider divorce. Suzanne kept a list of grievances on her phone, detailing a pattern of physical abuse. She was afraid to be alone in a room with Barry and worried about his drinking. She also suspected him of infidelity and tried to protect her phone from him, fearing he would seize it. On May 20th, when the police searched the Morphew house, they found a pen that Suzanne had bought to catch her husband in the act. Ironically, it recorded her own infidelity, not his. The pen revealed that Suzanne was having an affair with a man named Jeff, a high school acquaintance. The affair allegedly started in 2018 and had lasted for about 1.5 years. Although Jeff seemed like an obvious suspect, the police were able to clear him of any involvement in Suzanne's disappearance. The investigators believed that Barry had discovered Suzanne's infidelity, and that a note she wrote 2 days before she vanished supported this theory. The note indicated that Barry had accused Suzanne of having a boyfriend. The spy pen was crucial evidence, but it was not the only important discovery made during the search of the Morphew house. The police also found a tranquilizer dart cap in the family's dryer, a spent bullet casing in the bedroom, a large crack in the doorframe, and remnants of Suzanne's journal in the fireplace. When combined with telematic data, These findings suggested that Barry might have planned and carried out the murder of his wife, possibly killing her in the afternoon of May 9th, 2020. After texting her boyfriend 53 times and sending a selfie at around 2:10 p.m., Suzanne never used her phone again. It wasn't until 2 weeks later that the public learned Barry was a suspect in his wife's disappearance, when the police conducted a 2-day excavation of a construction site in Salida, one of Barry's job sites. In response, Barry released a strange video proclaiming his innocence. However, he wasn't arrested until May 5, 2021, nearly a year after the investigation began. Although the evidence against Barry was largely circumstantial, the prosecution seemed confident in their case due to his changing stories, repeated lies, and clear motive. Barry was charged with multiple crimes, including first-degree murder of his wife, tampering with physical evidence, possession of a dangerous weapon, and attempting to influence a public servant. Moreover, he was later charged with filing a fraudulent election ballot in Suzanne's name, claiming he didn't know it was wrong and that it would help Trump's campaign. Barry pleaded guilty to this charge and paid a $600 fine. In August 2021, a preliminary hearing was held to determine whether Barry Morse's case would proceed to trial. During this 4-day hearing, the prosecution presented their evidence and proposed a theory of what might have occurred. According to the prosecution, Barry murdered his wife on May 9, 2020, then dismembered her body in a hotel room. He allegedly disposed of the tools used and buried her body in an unmarked grave. However, the defense strongly challenged the prosecution's account, highlighting several inconsistencies. They pointed out that cadaver dogs were unable to detect any human remains in Barry's car or the hotel room where the alleged dismemberment took place. The defense also suggested that the dart bullet cover might have been planted as evidence. Furthermore, they noted visual discrepancies in the photos of the dryer, with one image showing the cap inside the dryer and another image showing it was not present. The defense argued that Barry couldn't have used his dart gun in the alleged murder because it was broken at the time. However, their strongest evidence was the discovery of partial DNA on Suzanne's car and bike helmet that didn't match Barry. This DNA actually matched evidence from 3 unsolved sexual assault cases in Chicago and Arizona, raising reasonable doubt about Barry's guilt. The discovery was significant, but it was only brought up during the hearing because the CBI investigator who collected the evidence went on military leave before following up on the lead. To make matters worse, the defense was never informed about the foreign DNA matches and only learned about them during the hearing. This meant the prosecution had withheld important evidence that could have helped the defense. Throughout the hearing, the defense argued that the presence of another suspect with a criminal record meant the prosecution didn't have enough evidence to convict Barry of killing his wife. They asked the judge to make a quick decision, but surprisingly, he delayed it, citing the large amount of time and resources invested in the case. On September 7th, the judge ruled that the case against Barry would proceed, setting his bail at $500,000. Barry was released from county jail on September 20th, 2021, just 9 days before the trial was scheduled to start. However, in a surprising turn of events, the prosecution suddenly filed a motion to dismiss all charges against Barry without prejudice, allowing them to potentially reopen the case if new evidence emerges. Given the lack of concrete evidence proving Barry's guilt and the prosecution's misconduct, securing a conviction would have been a difficult task. Moreover, the prosecution had missed several crucial deadlines, resulting in sanctions that prevented 14 key witnesses from testifying at the trial. The news of the dismissal shocked the public, and Barry was pictured leaving the courthouse with a wide smile, accompanied by his 2 daughters. On September 22, 2023, investigators unearthed multiple shallow graves in Moffett, Colorado, during an investigation. Suzanne's remains were identified using her dental records and chemotherapy port. Surprisingly, over 50 miles away from the initial search area, focused on the mountains surrounding Barry's property. The discovery of her body raises questions about Barry's potential involvement in the murder. Although the police are certain Barry's truck was not in Moffat on May 9th and 10th, some suggest he could have had an accomplice in disposing of Suzanne's body, allowing him to travel to Moffat, bury the body, and return. If investigators obtained a subpoena for Barry's phone and car data for an extended period, they might be able to link him to the location where Suzanne's remains were found. For now, Barry appears to be cleared of suspicion, but the police and district attorney's office continue to investigate the case. The 12th Judicial District's district attorney told CNN that the case remains open and no further comment can be made until more information becomes available, while offering condolences to Suzanne's family. Barry's lawyer has spoken out strongly since the body was found, suggesting that Suzanne might have been a victim of a serial killer because her remains were discovered in a graveyard with many other bodies. She thinks the police wrongly accused Barry and hopes they will eventually admit their mistake. Meanwhile, Barry has filed a $15 million lawsuit against the prosecutors, sheriff's departments, and investigators, claiming they wrongly accused him of being involved in his wife's disappearance and death. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Stacy Smith. Born on September 21, 1977, Stacy Ann Smith was known to her family and friends as a beautiful and outgoing person. During her school days, she was a popular cheerleader who attracted a lot of male attention. After graduating, she met Steven, the love of her life, and they decided to spend the rest of their lives together. In June 2002, they welcomed a daughter named Mackenzie, and soon after, they got married, believing their happiness would last forever. 4 years later, Stacy and Steven had a son named Landon. However, their relationship began to deteriorate, and they eventually broke up in 2009. At the time, Landon was 3 years old, and Mackenzie was 7. The family lived in St. Albans, West Virginia. After her divorce, Stacy was determined to make her children happy. One day, she ran into an old acquaintance, Brent, on the street. They had attended high school together, and Brent had had a crush on her back then, although she didn't feel the same way. However, this chance encounter sparked a romance between them. As they got to know each other better, Stacy's ex-husband, Steven, became aware of her new relationship. He would often see Stacy and Brent together when he came to pick up the kids for the weekend. Initially, Brent got along great with Stacy's children, which made her happy. However, as time went on, their relationship began to experience some turbulence. They started to have frequent arguments, mostly due to Brent's jealousy. He tried to exert control over certain aspects of her life, such as wanting to know who she was talking to on the phone. Despite their breakups, they would eventually reunite after calming down. On Christmas Eve in 2009, Stacy moved into a new home with her kids. Her cousin Timothy and boyfriend Brent lent a hand in decorating the house for Christmas and creating a warm ambience. A few days later, on December 28, 2009, Stacy's father John Paul attempted to reach his daughter by phone but received no response. As the hours ticked by with no answer or callback from Stacy, John grew concerned and decided to investigate. He got in the car and drove to the house where Stacy lived with her kids, a place they had occupied for only a few days before Christmas, and he wanted to check on their well-being. When John arrived at the house, everything seemed normal. He knocked on the front door and called out his daughter's name, but there was no response. The door was locked, so he looked through the window and spotted 3-year-old Landon inside. John caught Landon's attention and asked where his mom Stacy was. Landon replied that she was asleep. John's instincts told him something was off. Stacy wasn't a heavy sleeper and would have woken up from the knocking on the door. John instructed Landon how to open the door, and once inside, he told the boy to wait in the living room while he checked on Stacy. As John entered the kitchen, he was met with a horrific scene. Stacy's body lay lifeless on the floor, surrounded by bloodstains. The same gruesome sight extended into Stacy's bedroom. John instantly dialed 911 and requested assistance. The police thoroughly searched the house to ensure the perpetrator was not concealed inside. It was evident that Stacy's death was not accidental. The woman had succumbed to a fatal neck stab wound. A message on one of the walls caught the detective's attention immediately. The individual who penned it accused Stacy of being unfaithful. The message consisted of only 2 words, cheating, and a second word starting with W. It was particularly heartbreaking that Landon spent most of the day by himself while his mother lay dead. Forensic analysis revealed the boy's bloody footprints next to Stacy's body, indicating he had approached his mother, likely attempting to rouse her. At just 3 years old, he probably didn't comprehend that his mother wasn't simply sleeping. The police collected all possible evidence from the house, including cigarette butts and beer cans, which could provide DNA clues. However, the writing on the wall was the most intriguing piece of evidence for the investigators. They needed to identify who wrote it and why. Given the crime's motive was likely jealousy, and the extreme cruelty suggested a revenge attack, the perpetrator could be someone Stacy knew and trusted. There were no signs of forced entry, implying Stacy had let the killer into her home. The police also found Stacy's car and car keys missing, as well as her phone and the murder weapon. They issued a description of the car to all patrolmen, suspecting the criminal might have used it to flee the scene. Stacy's tragic death was devastating for her loved ones, especially her children, who had to come to terms with never seeing their mother again. Psychologists spoke with Landon to see if he had witnessed anything unusual, but the boy couldn't assist the police. Upon waking, he found his mother on the floor. Thinking she was asleep, he tried to rouse her, but she didn't respond. The prime suspect in this crime could be someone who believed Stacy had been unfaithful to them. Initially, there were 2 main suspects: Stacy's boyfriend, Brent, and her ex-husband, Stephen. Stephen might still have had strong feelings for Stacy, and despite their divorce, he might have been angry that she had moved on to another man. Brent, on the other hand, was known to be jealous, which could have led him to suspect Stacy of cheating. When investigating cases like this, detectives must consider all possible scenarios, no matter how unlikely they may seem at first. They were also looking into the possibility of a secret admirer or unknown romantic interest that even Stacy's closest friends and family might not have been aware of. As a young and attractive doctor's assistant, Stacy would have naturally attracted attention from men. While patrol officers were scouring the streets for Stacy's vehicle, investigators conducted interviews with her family members. Following these conversations, Stacy's boyfriend, Brent, emerged as the prime suspect. Her family and friends were well aware that Brent had a jealous streak and frequently became violent when he suspected Stacy was in contact with others. He had a volatile temper, prone to outbursts over trivial matters, which had led Stacy to sever communication with him on multiple occasions. Given this profile, the detectives pinpointed Brent as a key person of interest and decided to track him down for questioning. Their goal was to determine if he had any involvement in the crime and to confirm his whereabouts at the time of Stacy's death, while also observing his reactions to their inquiries. Brent was still at his country house before heading out, making it easy to track him down. Investigators secured a search warrant and found him in his garage when they arrived. Although he became nervous at the sight of the police, this didn't necessarily imply anything, as many people get anxious when officers show up at their doorstep. The investigators informed Brent of the search warrant for his home and that it was related to the investigation into Stacy Smith's death. Brent appeared to be genuinely shocked by the news and seemed devastated by grief. But the question was this just an act? The investigators aimed to find out when they took him to the police station for further questioning. Brent's behavior during the interrogation only heightened the police's suspicions about him. He admitted that his relationship with Stacy was unstable and marked by frequent arguments. According to Brent, their last altercation occurred on the day before her death. He told investigators that Stacy had cheated on him with one of his friends, which had severely damaged their relationship. Although some time had passed since then, the betrayal still lingered. Brent claimed that on December 27th, he had gone home after they quarreled, but returned to Stacy's house a couple of hours later. They had a calm conversation, and intimacy ensued. He left around 2 a.m. when Stacy's son Landon and her cousin Timothy were asleep in the house. Brent maintained that there were no issues between him and Stacy when he departed, and he was unaware of her death until the police informed him. However, no one could corroborate his alibi, which led investigators to question his story. As a result, they asked Brent to take a polygraph test to gauge his responses. After initial hesitation, Brent agreed to the test, hoping to clear his name. He passed the test without any issues. Initially, the police considered removing him from the list of suspects, but during the polygraph test, they noticed a small red spot on Brent's shirt that resembled dried blood. When questioned, Brent attributed the spot to a minor injury he had sustained the day before, claiming it was his own blood. However, only an expert examination could confirm or refute this statement. To verify Brent's testimony, the detectives decided to interview Stacy's cousin, Timothy, assuming Brent was telling the truth. As the last person to see Stacy alive, Timothy was a crucial witness. However, a major obstacle emerged. Timothy had vanished. Following the news of Stacy's death, the entire family gathered, but Timothy was nowhere to be found. He didn't answer his phone, and his whereabouts remained a mystery. This concerned both the family and the police, particularly given Timothy's history of substance abuse and potential debts. They feared that someone he owed money to might have taken revenge, but something had gone terribly wrong. Another stage has been added to the ongoing investigation. As previously noted, Stephen, Stacy's ex-husband, was one of the initial suspects in the crime. It's possible that Stephen was enraged by Stacy's relationship with Brent, even before their divorce was finalized. Although they were no longer living together, Stacy's actions may have offended Stephen, prompting him to commit the crime and leave a provocative message on the wall. Furthermore, one of Stephen's possible motives could have been related to his children, whom he only saw on weekends, and perhaps he wanted full-time custody. When Stephen arrived at the police station for questioning, he remained calm and composed, denying any involvement in Stacy's death. He claimed he would never harm the mother of his children. According to Stephen, his divorce from Stacy did not lead to animosity between them. In fact, he shared the same suspicion as her family, that Brent was responsible for the crime. Stephen provided an alibi for the night of the crime, which the police quickly verified, ruling him out as a suspect. Meanwhile, investigators searched for Stacy's car, only to discover that the vehicle in question was actually owned by her boss, Dr. William Casto. This raised the possibility of another romantic interest in Stacy's life. Further investigation revealed a romantic relationship between Stacy and Dr. Casto. Colleagues reported that the two were very close, and at some point, Dr. Casto had even given Stacy a car as a gift. This new information added Dr. Casto to the list of potential suspects, with the police considering the possibility that he might have discovered Stacy's relationship with Brent and taken drastic action. With all this in mind, the detective began searching for Dr. Casto, who didn't try to hide and went about his daily routine. After learning about Stacy's death and that the investigators wanted to speak with him, William Casto voluntarily went to the police station. During the interrogation, he admitted to having an intimate relationship with Stacy and giving her the car. According to him, they had been in a consensual relationship for several years before her death, and he would often help her with her problems. Casto denied any involvement in the crime, stating he had no motive to harm Stacy. He was forthcoming with the investigators, providing them with his alibi for the night of the crime. This solid alibi allowed him to be ruled out as a suspect. Now that Casto was no longer a suspect, the police still needed to identify who had written the offensive message in Stacy's house and who she had offended so deeply. Was there another man in her life? The police had to find answers to these questions. Meanwhile, the police used GPS tracking technology to locate Stacy's car, which they found in a deserted parking lot about 5 miles from her house. Investigators believed the vehicle held the key to solving the case. Patrol cars were dispatched to the location, and the car was towed to the police parking lot for forensic examination. Although Stacy's credit cards and personal belongings were found inside, there was no knife linked to the crime or any other evidence. A surprising development emerged in the investigation when the police looked into Timothy's background, Stacy's missing cousin. It turned out that he had a criminal history, including a previous conviction for a sexual offense and theft. According to the charges, Timothy had molested a girl, but he claimed she had lied about her age, and he thought she was above the legal age limit. Timothy served time in prison for this offense and was required to register as a sex offender, but he failed to do so. Timothy Ray Sutherland contacted the police 2 days after Stacy's death, claiming to be staying at a local motel and denying any involvement in her murder. However, he was wanted for arrest due to his failure to register as a sex offender. When the police arrived at the motel, Timothy had escaped, but his girlfriend told them he was hiding in an abandoned trailer on the other side of town. He was arrested on December 30th, 2009, and taken to the police station for questioning. During the interrogation, investigators asked Timothy to corroborate Brent's alibi, which was that he had stayed at Stacy's house with her and her son. Timothy confessed to being at his cousin's house that night, where Brent and Stacy had gotten into a fight. Timothy's cousin accused Brent of killing Stacy, stating that Brent was not a good person and did not care about or respect Stacy. When questioned about why he had left the crime scene, Timothy explained that he was afraid of being arrested due to his unregistered sex offender status. In essence, Timothy accused Brent of Stacy's murder. However, after receiving the lab report, these allegations became less credible. The dried blood on Brent's shirt was found to be his own, not Stacy's. As a result, the police could not find any evidence linking Brent to the crime. Consequently, the circle of suspects narrowed to focus on Timothy and Landon, who were the only ones remaining in the house when Brent left. Clearly, 3-year-old Landon could not have committed this crime and written the offensive message on the wall, which meant Timothy was hiding something. The investigators noticed dried blood stains on Timothy's jeans and sent all his clothes to the lab for analysis. Despite this, he continued to insist that Brent was responsible for Stacy's death. The investigators persisted in questioning him, and eventually, he told the truth. Timothy Sutherland let Brent yell at his cousin, Stacy Smith, and she always forgave him. One night, they had a fight in front of Timothy, and Brent stormed off. But a few hours later, Brent came back, and Stacy forgave him yet again. Timothy was angry about this and led Brent into Stacy's bedroom, where it was clear they were making up. After Brent left, Timothy went to Stacy's bedroom to talk to her. The court documents describe what happened next, without going into unnecessary detail. In 2009, Timothy Sutherland was staying with his cousin, Stacy Smith, in St. Albans, West Virginia. On December 28, 2009, Timothy got into an argument with Stacy in her bedroom. When Stacy called him a junkie, Timothy became enraged at being accused of being a drug addict. He left the bedroom, went to the kitchen to smoke a cigarette, and then returned with a butcher knife. He stabbed Stacy in the neck as she lay on the bed, then fled the scene. Mr. Sutherland took possession of Miss Smith's personal belongings, including her cell phone, credit card, money, and car keys. Additionally, he vandalized a living room wall in the house by writing the word "cheating" on it. According to Timothy, after he injured Stacy, she was able to get out of bed and take a few more steps. At the time, her son was asleep in another room, and her daughter was staying overnight with friends. As Timothy recounted these events to the detectives, he became emotional and appeared genuinely remorseful. He also revealed the location of the murder weapon, stating that he had thrown the knife he used to kill Stacy out of the car window near her house. The police later found the knife at the exact location Timothy specified. Furthermore, laboratory analysis revealed that Timothy's jeans were stained with Stacy's blood. When questioned about the wall writings, he claimed he wanted to frame Stacy's boyfriend, Brent, as the prime suspect in her murder. Given their frequent arguments, he hoped people would assume Brent had killed her out of jealousy. However, Brent suspected there was more to it. He believed Timothy harbored romantic feelings for his cousin and was envious of her. That fateful night, Timothy sat in the living room armchair, overhearing Brent and Stacy's activities in the bedroom. Maybe his jealousy boiled over, causing him to lose control and commit an irreparable act. The police explored the possibility that Timothy might have attempted to coerce Stacy into a romantic encounter after Brent left, but they found no concrete evidence to support this theory. With only 2 people aware of what transpired that night, and one of them deceased, the truth remained elusive. Although Timothy Sutherland initially confessed to the crime during his interrogation, he later claimed innocence at his first court hearing in 2010. Despite this, the authorities had gathered sufficient evidence to secure a conviction. The central issue was whether the jury would believe the prosecutor's claim that the crime was premeditated, or the defense lawyer's argument that Timothy committed the crime in a fit of passion. The series of events leading up to the crime suggested that Timothy was fully aware of his actions. He had an argument with Stacy, left her bedroom, went to the kitchen to smoke a cigarette, and then returned with a knife. On March 18, 2011, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, and Timothy Ray Sutherland was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. 2 years later, in 2013, he attempted to appeal the verdict, but was unsuccessful. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Danilo Cavalcante. On July 3, 1989, a child was born in the municipality of Esto in the state of Maranhão, Brazil. The boy was given the common Portuguese name, Danilo. This child experienced a tough upbringing. He wasn't spoon-fed or comforted with bedtime stories. No one took him by the hand to school when he reached school age. Instead, like many children in his impoverished neighborhood, he grew up on the streets. The environment for adults and children in Brazil's favelas is marked by oppressive poverty, low living standards, and high unemployment. All these factors contribute to a thriving street crime culture. When growing up in such conditions, amid dirt, poverty, and lack of basic human necessities, one's instincts for self-preservation kick in. People survive as best they can, or choose to. Unfortunately, most often someone who has known only violence from childhood may take the same violent path since they know no other way. Our story today delves into horrific brutality and relentless obsession that can destroy lives. Such events unfolded recently. In 2019, Sarah Brando eagerly awaited the arrival of her younger sister Deborah and her 2 nephews, Ian and Yasmin, at the airport. After a failed relationship with her children's father, Deborah, who was 30 at the time, driven by a genuine desire to provide a better life for her children, moved from Brazil to Pennsylvania to live with her sister. The family quickly adapted to their new environment, enjoying their cozy home and improved living standards. Deborah Brando and her sister Sarah were inseparable. They worked together at a cleaning service and often stayed connected via phone calls throughout the day. Their lives were quiet and happy as they embraced their newfound circumstances in another country. However, an unexpected acquaintance altered their destinies forever. In 2020, while spending a day off with her children at a park, Deborah met Danilo Cavalcante, a compatriot who was 31 years old at that time. a trusting relationship swiftly developed between them. Danilo was attentive and kind to both Deborah and her children. Deborah fell in love with her Brazilian neighbor Danilo Cavalcante and believed she had found a dependable partner. After several months into their relationship, they rented a small house together and began living as one cohesive family unit. After some time, Danilo, whose temperament was often hot and emotional, began to lose interest in the apparent perfection of their family life. As he grew closer to Deborah, his jealousy and obsession intensified. Mistrust without basis gradually transformed into a need for total control over the relationship. Frequent conflicts erupted between the couple, often culminating in violence. Danilo would drink heavily every night and return home as a completely different person, almost like an angered animal. He demanded complete submission and obedience from Deborah, punishing her severely in front of their children when she resisted. Despite her strength and efforts to defend herself and protect her children, the situation became untenable for Deborah. Unable to endure such treatment any longer, she moved back to her sister's home. After numerous threats from Danilo, Deborah sought protection by going to the police and subsequently obtaining an order of protection from the court that prohibited him from approaching her. Despite her attempts to distance herself from him, Danilo pursued her aggressively, often resorting to threats of violence if she even considered ending their relationship permanently. Fearing for her safety, Deborah decided to investigate Danilo's background. She reached out to acquaintances in Brazil through social media and unearthed startling information about his past life and his reasons for coming to the United States. To her shock, she discovered that Danilo was not who he had claimed to be. On November 5, 2017, in Brazil, Danilo had fatally wounded a 20-year-old student named Walter Jr. Moreira dos Reis by shooting him 5 times near a restaurant in Figueroa for something as trivial as a car repair debt. Investigation revealed that the two men were friends before this tragic incident occurred. Following the crime, Brazilian authorities issued an arrest warrant after granting the prosecutor's office's request for preventive detention. However, Danilo managed to leave Brazil through Brasilia International Airport due to procedural disagreements within the judicial system that delayed registering this decision in the National Warrant Registry. This discovery left Deborah stunned as she realized how much danger she was truly in by merely being associated with Danilo Cavalcante. It wasn't until 7 months after the crime that Cavalcante entered Puerto Rico illegally. In June 2018, a warrant for his arrest was issued in Brazil. On entering Puerto Rico, Cavalcante obtained a fake ID and eventually settled in Chester County, Pennsylvania, where his sister lived. Upon discovering Danilo's true identity, Deborah issued an ultimatum: leave her alone, or she would reveal his identity. Unfortunately, this decision proved fatal. On the evening of April 18, 2021, Deborah was walking with her children outside her house. The children were playing catch-up while Deborah chatted quietly with an elderly neighbor. When Danilo Cavalcante approached and pulled Deborah aside for a conversation, the neighbor looked on but did not intervene. The discussion initially appeared calm. However, at one moment, Cavalcante produced 2 knives and attacked her. Deborah fell to the ground as he stabbed her multiple times. Despite her children's pleas for him to stop hurting their mother, he continued in a frenzy, inflicting a total of 38 stab wounds. A neighbor witnessing this brutal act attempted to administer emergency aid and stop the bleeding, while Deborah's daughter ran to get help and call emergency services. Deborah Brendo was rushed to a hospital but succumbed to her injuries. Meanwhile, Danilo Cavalcante fled Pennsylvania to evade capture and remained on the run for several hours until apprehended by Virginia State Police. He was extradited back to Pennsylvania and placed under arrest pending trial. On August 16, 2023, in Chester County, Danilo Cavalcante's trial for first-degree murder commenced. The investigation revealed that Cavalcante had refused to accept the end of their relationship and had been intimidating Deborah through regular domestic violence since 2020. During the trial, Deborah's sobbing child testified, recounting repeatedly the terrifying events of that day. It took the jury only 15 minutes to convict Cavalcante guilty. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Following the verdict announcement, Cavalcante was transferred to Chester County Jail in Pocopson, where he awaited transfer to a federal prison. On August 31, 2023, around 9 a.m., an inmate managed to escape from Chester County Jail. Utilizing a chimney, he scaled the wall between two narrow hallways and ascended through the chimney to the roof. Avoiding the barbed wire fences, he broke free. Surveillance footage captured him in the tight space between two walls in the exercise yard. He used his arms and legs to ascend upward, eventually running across the roof. From there, he climbed over the fence and pushed through the barbed wire to gain freedom. Prison officials were well aware of vulnerabilities identified after Igor Bolta's escape and believed they addressed them adequately. Officials thought that adding barbed wire after a similar escape attempt by an inmate named Igor Bolta just months earlier would prevent any jailbreaks. Acting Warden Howard Holland stated that according to court documents in May, inmate Igor Bolta had climbed onto the roof of the jail and jumped to a less secure location, but was captured less than a mile from the prison, with it about 5 minutes. In response to this urgent matter, the prison was closed, initiating a massive search for Danilo Cavalcante, considered particularly dangerous. Alerts were issued everywhere. Danilo Cavalcante, age 33, with black hair and possibly armed and very dangerous. The escape of such a dangerous felon gained significant media attention. The search for this fugitive was broadcast daily across all media channels. The Pennsylvania State Police Chief, overseeing the search, held regular press conferences and briefings, providing residents with precise information about this special operation. He urged residents not to stay on the sidelines, but to take an active role through vigilance and observation to help determine the perpetrator's route. And it worked. About a few hours after the escape, Danilo Cavalcante was spotted walking along a road about 2 miles of the prison. With the help of reports from local residents, Cavalcante was seen by camera in the early morning hours of September 2nd. Police set up a search perimeter around the area, securing roads and railroads that run through it to prevent Cavalcante's potential escape, and put up a $10,000 reward for any information leading to his capture. Authorities began searching within 2 miles of the jail in the heavily wooded area of Pocopson Township in Chester County. A local resident saw the fugitive in a creek bed just days after the escape, but he fled into the woods before police could find him. The search continued and the perimeter expanded after he spent about a week on the run. A security camera captured Cavalcante at Longwood Gardens, a popular botanical garden nearly 3 miles from the jail, just south of where law enforcement initially searched for him. There's a lot of ravines, tall fields, high grass, a lot of cover for a guy who is 5 feet tall and 120 pounds. Robert Clark, Deputy U.S. Marshal for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, stated on September 5th that in addition to tough terrain, searchers had difficulty with extreme heat and humidity lasting for several days. After a week of desperate searches for Cavalcante, the number of officers involved grew from 250 to almost 400. The search team has been strengthened not only in numbers, but also in equipment. Helicopters flying over began playing a recorded message from Cavalcante's Portuguese-speaking mother, begging him to surrender peacefully. The next morning, Cavalcante was spotted by a security camera on property located about 2 miles south of the prison. Police moved in and set up a new perimeter around this facility and Longwood, as well as nearby schools. These areas will be closed while search efforts continue. Police conducted an intensive search over several days until eventually Longwood Gardens briefly reopened with limited access before being forced to evacuate and close again following another sighting of Caval. On September 7th, law enforcement doubled the reward for information leading to his capture from $10,000 to $20,000. After nearly a week of searching, tension was palpable. Locals knew a man convicted of murder was on the loose. Yet, authorities had not disclosed how Cavalcante escaped from prison. In Chester County, Philadelphia residents were instructed by police to lock all doors and windows, secure vehicles, and stay indoors. CBS News reported that 34-year-old Danilo Cavalcante escaped from a Pennsylvania prison. The intense search pressed on until a significant development occurred on September 9th. Cavalcante somehow managed to breach the search perimeter in Longwood Gardens. He was seen on a video intercom, standing on a porch of a former colleague's home near Phoenixville, almost 20 miles northeast of the search area. Cavalcante cleverly altered his appearance. He shaved and donned new clothes, and remained undetected as he moved across the state. He stole a van from a local dairy store and drove it to Phoenixville, with hopes of getting help and shelter from acquaintances. On the morning of September 10th, authorities discovered an abandoned stolen van with an empty gas tank in a field in suburban East Nantmeal. The search area then shifted to the northern part of Chester County. Cavalcante's movements once again prompted changes to the search perimeter on September 11th. As investigators continued their efforts, Cavalcante was listed on Interpol's Most Wanted list, and the reward for information regarding his whereabouts was increased further. That night, emergency services received an urgent call from a local resident who reported that a man matching Cavalcante's description had broken into his garage. In self-defense, the homeowner fired multiple shots and hit him 7 times. Surprisingly, Cavalcante managed to escape and stole a .22 caliber rifle with both scope and flashlight attachments. Police arrived swiftly at the scene and discovered Cavalcante's sweatshirt and shoes nearby. Once they confirmed his identity and recognized that this dangerous felon was now armed, local authorities urged residents in South Coventry to lock all doors and windows, secure vehicles, and stay indoors whenever possible. This fugitive remains particularly dangerous, and his escape has deeply concerned area residents. Several school districts even canceled classes as precautionary measures to ensure safety. On the day after Cavalcante was seen on surveillance video, police expanded the search and urged residents to keep their doors locked. A new search perimeter set up in South Coventry Township, which was tighter than before, because authorities believed Cavalcante was now surrounded. The search continued throughout September 12th. Around 1 a.m. on September 13th, an aircraft with thermal imaging technology spotted Cavalcante in the woods. However, due to bad weather, the police had to wait until sunrise to approach, as the surveillance plane could not operate safely. The significant breakthrough occurred in the early morning hours of September 13th, when authorities found out that a security alarm went off just after midnight within the final search perimeter. According to Biven, an officer of illicit drug enforcement, the aircraft using thermal imaging technology detected a heat signal around 1 a.m., shortly after the alarm was triggered. Ron Johnson, a retired Missouri State Highway Patrol captain, mentioned that technology played a major role in this operation. He said law enforcement faced many challenges for a long time, but managed to pick up the heat signet from a DEA spy plane just in time. At around 8 a.m. on September 13th, police found Cavalcante asleep with the rifle he had stolen from his home 2 nights earlier. Danilo Cavalcante, a dangerous criminal, tried to escape by crawling into thick undergrowth. However, a police dog named Yoda subdued him by biting his head and holding him until police arrived. Lieutenant Colonel George Biven stated at a news conference that Yoda caused Cavalcante minor head injuries during his capture. Cavalcante was questioned by the police immediately after his capture. He revealed that he survived on watermelons and creek water and traveled only at night. He even admitted he almost got caught by an officer while hiding at one point. His plan was to steal a car and travel to Canada. Since returning to prison, Cavalcante has been charged with multiple crimes related to his escape, including burglary, trespassing, and theft. Following his capture, local and state officials, including Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, expressed gratitude to all law enforcement officers who assisted in the search for high-risk felon Danilo Cavalcante. Chief George Bivens, who led the search, discussed the multitude of challenges that law enforcement officers faced during the operation to locate Cavalcante. He highlighted the intense heat and thunderstorms that occurred in the area during the search. Additionally, he noted that each of the search perimeters was established in heavily wooded areas. The search team was composed of approximately 500 law enforcement officers, including Pennsylvania State Police, FBI, ATF, and U.S. Marshals, who thoroughly searched the area around the escape scene. In the wake of Cavalcante's escape, police set up a perimeter spanning several miles in each direction. The Chester County Jail Board, responsible for overseeing the jail, faced heavy criticism from local residents for their failure to prevent Cavalcante's escape. Residents pointed out that the jail had previously been given an opportunity to implement necessary security improvements after Egor Bolte's attempted escape on May 19th. Those enhancements could have potentially prevented Cavalcante's escape, since he used the same method as Bolte did. Following this incident, the prison has already terminated the prison guard who was on duty during Cavalcante's September 7th escape. Prison officials stated that this guard had a chance to spot Cavalcante during his breakout. In response to public concern, and days after capturing the fugitive, Chester County Jail announced they had installed a tin roof over the area where Cavalcante scaled 2 walls to access and eventually escaped from the facility. Alongside this measure, various other security enhancements and improvements were also implemented. Clearly, there are questions that Chester County officials will need to address regarding how the suspect managed to escape, especially considering this prison's history, said Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. He emphasized how crucial communication and cooperation among all law enforcement agencies and local residents were during this extensive search effort. Thanks to these combined efforts, Danilo will now never go free again.
Located in Lee County, Auburn is the largest city in eastern Alabama. It's also Alabama's fastest-growing metropolitan area and the 19th fastest-growing metro area in the United States since 1990. Unofficially nicknamed the loveliest village on the plains, Auburn is a melting pot for cultures with its southern hospitality. This historic college town is the home to Auburn University, one of the most recognized public universities in the nation. Today's story involves the former student of this university, Lori Slasinski. Lori Ann Slasinski was born to parents Casey and Arlene Slasinski on September 21, 1981. Gifted with blue eyes and blonde hair, Lori was always adored by her parents and her big brother Paul. The family was originally from New York State, but later moved south to the rural Alabama farm country near the town of Auburn when Lori was just 13 years old. As a country girl being raised with animals, Lori was an avid animal lover. According to her friends, Lori was absolutely beautiful. She loved spending time with friends, watching movies, riding her bicycle, and playing video games. In addition to all that fun, she was also very studious, and her family tried to support her as much as they could. After finishing high school, Lori enrolled in nearby Auburn University, where she majored in psychology with a minor in criminology. Her parents bought her a mobile home so that she could live off campus in a manicured trailer park that was popular with students. She was living alone with her beloved dog, Peanut, a Yorkshire Terrier. Her close bond with her family remained intact, with her mother calling every day to check up on her. In 2005, she graduated with honors from Auburn University. Soon after graduation, she took up a job in the East Alabama Mental Health Center while still living in the trailer park. She also made plans to go for her master's degree in psychology in the near future. Lori's family was proud of her achievements, unaware of any foreshadowing of evil that was looming over her head. On June 10, 2006, 24-year-old Lori had made plans for a girls' night at her best friend Lindsey Braun's house. They had plans to have a few drinks and watch a movie. Lori first met Lindsey in their junior year at Auburn University. Already impressed by Lori's sweet, charming, and outgoing personality, the two girls became friends. The bond only grew stronger when they had both got a job at the same mental health facility after completing graduation. Around 6:30 p.m. on June 10th, Lori called Lindsay saying that she had to stop at the store, and then she'd head over to her house for the movie night. Unfortunately, she would never make it there. Lindsay grew worried when she did not hear from Lori again that night or the following day. She called Lori several times and left messages on her home answering machine, but she never heard back from her. When Lori did not show up at her workplace on Monday, June 12th, Lindsay's concerns skyrocketed. It was very unusual for Lori to miss work and not inform anyone. After another no-show at work on the following Tuesday, June 13th, Lindsay, along with another co-worker, went to Lori's house to check on her. When they reached the trailer home, Lindsay could not find Lori anywhere. Upon entering, she found the door unlocked and the AC on, which was pretty surprising. She also observed that Lori's dog Peanut was inside his crate. He looked well-nourished and happy, as if someone was taking care of him. Amazingly, his crate was unsoiled, even though Lori had been missing for several days at that point. Lindsay felt that something was amiss, as it was unlike Lori to leave her beloved pet alone unattended. Lindsay remembered that Lori had placed 3 rugs on her kitchen floor as the dog refused to walk on the tile. These rugs were missing, along with the outside trash can, when Lindsay entered. Later that same day, June 13, 2006, Lori's mother, Arlene, got a call from her workplace regarding Lori missing work 2 days in a row. Arlene immediately tried to call her, but could not get a hold of her. Afraid for her daughter's well-being, Arlene immediately left for Auburn after alerting her husband Casey of their daughter's disappearance. Upon arrival, she entered Lori's trailer and found a disturbing scene. She noticed the door was slightly ajar and her bed was perfectly made, but there was no sign of Lori. Her car was also missing. With a closer look, she noticed Lori's kitchen rugs, a pillow from a couch, a Galileo thermometer, a green trash can that Lori put a rake and shovel in, and the phone cord for her landline were all gone. Alarm bells rang as Arlene instantly realized something was horribly wrong. She officially reported her daughter missing, while still hoping that she would show up eventually. As the initial investigation was launched and police scanned through Lori's trailer home, they could not find any significant evidence that could link a possible suspect. However, they noticed there were obvious signs of a struggle and scuff marks on the wall. There was semen discovered on Lori's bedsheet, and traces of blood were also found on the doorknob. A coat hanger and a single golden hoop earring were also found at the scene. Police would soon recover surveillance footage on June 10, 2006, showing Lori stopping at an Alabama Walmart. That was the last known sighting of Lori, and nobody had any clue what happened to her after that. A tip would, however, soon come in later that afternoon. Eileen got a phone call from one of Lori's friends, 25-year-old Daryl Richard Ennis, who was commonly referred to as Rick. Rick told Arlene that he met Lori the day she went missing, and he thought she might have gone off to make a drug deal. Lori had met Rick Ennis at a bowling alley where he worked. She often hung out there when she was still a student. Arlene knew him because Lori invited him to spend Christmas with Lori's family in 2005. Lori felt bad for him, having no family of his own. However, Arlene could not believe what Ennis was claiming, despite her daughter's close friendship with him. She did not believe that Lori would ever be involved in drug dealing. She thought that he was simply lying through his teeth, but didn't have any clue as to why. Police were also given this information by Ennis himself, yet before they could act on it, a terrifying discovery was made. On June 14, 2006, 4 days after Lori's disappearance, at approximately 4:40 a.m., her car was found fully ablaze on an impasse near the bowling alley where Rick had previously been employed. From that point on, the investigation shifted from a missing persons case to a possible homicide. According to investigators, the fire destroyed any traces of evidence that would have possibly been found inside the car. However, Lori was not inside the vehicle at the time it was burnt. A hand-rolled cigarette was on the ground near the car. A gas can was also found close by in the woods. The incident horrified Lori's family, and they were almost certain now that something very bad had happened to her. Investigating the information Ennis provided to Arlene was their only clue at the time. When Ennis was brought in for questioning, he repeated the same story he told Arlene, only adding more details this time. Ennis claimed that he and Lori grew marijuana together. According to him, Lori might have gone off to sell her share of the weed they grew together. He also added that Lori could have been dealing with shady people. Police raided Lori's trailer. However, even after a thorough search, the police were unable to find any evidence of Lori dealing drugs. During the interview, investigators also took notice several scratches on Rick's hands and arms, which he claimed came from his dog. More concerning things came to light when investigators talked to Lindsay. As per Lindsay's account, she had heard Rick Ennis speaking in the background when she and Lori last spoke on the phone the day she vanished. Since Ennis was known to be a friend of Lori, Lindsay did not think much of it at the time. Lindsay claimed that when she texted Rick inquiring about Lori's whereabouts, he said that she was fine when he left her. Lindsay also informed the investigators that before her disappearance, Lori had told her that Rick had written a love letter to her. His feelings for her were not reciprocated. Lindsay also claimed that Lori told her that she was not romantically attracted to Rick and was going to have a conversation about it with him. Later, investigators found out that Ennis told her friends about his letter and Lori's rejection. When police re-interviewed him to confront him with the new information they collected from Lindsay, he admitted meeting her hours before her disappearance, but insisted that Lori was perfectly fine and was preparing to go to the store when he left her house. However, investigators discovered several inconsistencies in his statement. Investigators began focusing on Rick Ennis as their prime suspect. Their suspicion only grew stronger after searching his car. Investigators found several items of interest, including a knife, some cleaning supplies, and handcuffs. To gather more evidence, investigators began digging through his past, but they were not expecting the twists they were going to be met with. Looking through the unimaginably dark past of Rick Ennis, investigators discovered that he had actually murdered his mother and stepfather when he was only 12 years of age. On March 3, 1993, just 10 months after their marriage, Ennis had beaten his mother, who was known as a sweet church-going lady, to death with a baseball bat after shooting her in the face in their trailer in North Montgomery, Alabama, where they lived. Ennis's stepfather, Eddie Joe Flowers, who was known as Elvis because of his sideburns and vibrant personality, was met with the same fate as his wife. After murdering his mother, Rick shot him in the face using a shotgun when Eddie came home from work. After the murder, Ennis drove the family car and crashed into a fence on the side of the highway. Alabama State Trooper John Clark stopped Ennis walking along the highway. When he asked him where his parents were, Ennis told him that he'd killed them. As Detective Clark searched the backpack the young boy was carrying, he found a kitchen knife and some ammunition for a 12-gauge shotgun, as well as for a .22 caliber. When asked why he killed his parents, the emotionless 12-year-old Ennis told the cops that he was mad that his parents planned to move. He said he didn't want to leave the school. For 2 days, investigators believed he lived with their bodies while continuing to go to school. He further confessed about his future plans to kill his 3 stepsisters, which further shocked the investigators at the time. Although his murders were nothing short of gruesome, due to his age, he could not be tried as an adult. As a minor at the time, he was sent to jail for 9 years for the double murder. After he was released, he moved to Auburn, where he then met Lois Lasinski. After Lois' disappearance, Rick Ennis was the prime suspect in the case. However, in spite of Ennis's past and loads of circumstantial evidence, it was impossible to charge Ennis for Lois' murder without Lois' body or any direct evidence. Ennis left Auburn just weeks after his interview with detectives and moved elsewhere, finally ending up in Huntsville, Alabama in 2007. By then, though, Lori's case had gone cold. After moving to Huntsville, he soon moved in with a roommate, Abram Sissons. Abram noticed that Ennis brought kitchen rugs with them, which he claimed were a gift from Lori. He also told Abram that he was in love with a woman in Auburn who disappeared without a trace, but did not mention her name. Abram found nothing unusual in these conversations until he learned about Ennis's dark past. He then asked Ennis to leave immediately. Abram later claimed that when he returned to his apartment, it was completely trashed. However, the police recovered the rugs, one of which tested positive for Ennis's blood. Abram also claimed later that he saw a Galileo thermometer in Ennis's room before he moved in with him, the same kind that was missing from Laurie's home. Sadly, the police could still not link Ennis to Laurie's murder at this time. As their prime suspect remained at large, the case remained unsolved while Laurie's devastated family waited for answers. For years, this case had no updates. Then in 2016, after a decade, Mark Whitaker, a special agent of the Alabama State Bureau of Investigation, opened a cold case unit and started reinvestigating Laurie's disappearance along with his team, which included his longtime partner, Agent J.W. Barnes. Laurie's case was their first project, and they began revisiting the evidence, sending some of the items to forensic labs for testing, and conducting several interviews and re-interviews. After the re-examination of the evidence, Ennis naturally became his main suspect. Agent Mark was aware of Ennis's past, and his gut told him that Ennis had done something similar to Laurie. But he had no idea as to how to prove his guilt without more evidence or a body. However, in an unexpected twist, Agent Whitaker's partner, Agent J.W. Barnes, found an important piece of evidence while looking through the files. He discovered a report in an envelope that had not been opened for 10 years. After Laurie's disappearance in 2006, police collected evidence from the trailer, but no one followed up with it until the results came in. The results showed that semen found on Laurie's bedsheet and blood on the interior side of the front door contained Rick Ennis's DNA. After organizing all the evidence, investigators built a strong case against Rick Ennis and were eventually able to get an indictment order in 2018. By this time, Ennis was happily engaged to a school librarian named Alana Atkinson and was living in Pilot, Virginia. There, he was working for a company that designed and built portable living structures called yurts. On August 6, 2018, on his 38th birthday, 12 years after Laurie Slasinski went missing from Auburn, Rick Ennis was arrested by a task force of U.S. Marshals. While it came as a relief to Laurie's family, Ennis's fiancée and co-workers were shocked by this turn of events. After being arrested on 2 counts of capital murder, his trial was postponed due to COVID-19. The trial finally began on April 1, 2022. While the prosecution presented all the evidence that suggested Ennis's involvement in the crime, including the cigarette butt in Laurie's bedsheet containing his DNA, the defense argued that police could have taken the cigarette from Ennis's home and planted it at the crime scene. They also attacked Laurie Slasinski's character by trying to portray her as a drug dealer. To explain how his DNA got on the bedsheet, Rick claimed that he had consensual sex with Laurie before her disappearance, suggesting that they were still intimate despite Laurie's rejection of his advances. However, his story did not seem very convincing, especially when 2 more witnesses came forward with jaw-dropping information. One of his former co-workers in Alabama, Jeremy Brooks, stated that on June 9, 2006, just 1 day prior to Laurie's mysterious disappearance, he received a call from Ennis asking if he could bring him gas and if he could keep the gas tank. Jeremy rejected his request.
What did he say? All of the A's and gas, and it was a way that I could run in and get nothing gas.
Later, after police found Laurie's scorched car in a gas can, it matched the description of a gas can that was missing from the bowling alley where Ennis worked. Another of his former co-workers from South Carolina, Terry Booth, testified about the chilling experience she had with Ennis years prior. Terry remembered asking Ennis why he moved from Auburn. Ennis told him that he had to get rid of a body. Although he thought Ennis was just joking with him, the announcement of his arrest for Laurie's murder proved otherwise. Although Rick Ennis continued to deny all allegations against him and maintained his innocence, jurors came up with a guilty verdict after 2 days of deliberation. He was facing the death penalty for the crime, but the DA agreed to take the death penalty off the table after consulting with Arlene. Arlene later said that she felt agreeing to a life without parole sentence for Rick Ennis would save her from years of potential appeal hearings, but would also ensure that Ennis would never be free. On April 14, 2022, he was sentenced to life without parole. He remains incarcerated in William E. Donaldson Correctional Facility in Bessemer, Alabama. For Arlene Slasinski, the outcome was bittersweet. With tears in her eyes, she shared that it meant she had to finally accept that Laurie was never coming home, an incredible hope that a portion of her heart always clung to. Let us know in the comment section what your thoughts are on this tragic case. Do you think Rick Ennis will ever give up the location of Lori's remains? If you like our content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Lisa Maria Kaiser was born in 1994 in a large family where her 8 siblings also grew up. It was a large, but far from prosperous family. Parents were busy with their own problems and did not show love and care towards their children. Moreover, there were rumors that abuse and violence were rampant in the family. The story in question unfolded in the year 2020, at the very time when the whole world was consumed with the fight against COVID-19. In one corner of Ecuador, quietly and unnoticed, truly terrible events were unfolding. Here, in the small parish of Pifo, on the northeastern outskirts of Quito, the protagonist of this tragic story was born and raised. Lisa Maria Kaiser, a woman with an enigmatic gaze whose life story became a true Ecuadorian nightmare. On that unfortunate Tuesday, October 27, 2020, Lisa sent several messages to the father of her children, David. They were words full of despair, because their paths with David at that time had already almost parted. In these lines, she confessed her love for him and her unexpected new pregnancy. However, in subsequent messages, Lisa wrote that life was losing its meaning for her, and the decision to terminate the pregnancy was inevitable. Throughout the night, Lisa pleaded with David to come to her, but his refusal was resolute. His parents also urged him to stay home, and David took their advice. In the early morning hours of October 28th, neighbors in Lisa's home heard a faint cry for help. Looking out the window, they found a woman lying on the floor with signs of vomiting. The neighbors rushed to help her, immediately calling emergency services. The doctors and police arrived and found Lisa in a critical condition, but still alive. After administering first aid, she was immediately hospitalized. However, in the house, her children, a girl of 5 and a boy of 9, were found unconscious. The doctors were unable to help them. Their little hearts had stopped beating at that point. Authorities learned the identity of the children's father and contacted David Acosta, who, upon learning of the tragedy, immediately arrived on the scene accompanied by his father. He was informed that Lisa was in the hospital and his children were found without signs of life. After several days of fighting for life in the hospital, Lisa finally regained consciousness. By that time, the investigators, guided by their findings, had presented the prosecutor's office with sufficiently convincing arguments to issue an arrest warrant for this mysterious woman. When she was released from the hospital, she was immediately transferred to a social rehabilitation center. The authorities insisted that Lisa undergo a psychological and psychiatric evaluation, as her state of mind required further investigation as part of the upcoming trial. Lisa ended up in a rehabilitation center, and doctors and psychologists took up their work. In a conversation with a criminal psychologist, Lisa opened up about her difficult childhood, where her parents fought and abused each other and their children. Her childhood had a noticeable impact on her state of mind, and moments of quarrels and her parents' divorce became an integral part of her memories. Such a childhood forced Lisa to go to work from the age of 11 to be able to study. The girl strived to escape from her dysfunctional family and build her future in a different way. The expert report also indicated that Lisa had been abused. She talked about how, after several years of marriage, David, her husband, changed dramatically. He began to humiliate his spouse and then to raise his hand against her. On the day of the tragedy with the children, investigators working at the scene found several glasses with liquid residue on the table. These finds later revealed traces of epilepsy pills belonging to one of the children, as well as other chemicals requiring identification. Police officers thoroughly searched the house, and after noticing a strange odor in the kitchen, noticed a suspicious area under the utility room. They broke down the barrier and found a lifeless body wrapped in a blanket, with characteristic signs of having been there for a long time. Later, further investigation revealed that the discovered body belonged to Jaime Yanchaguano, a 28-year-old who had been in contact with Lisa. Jaime had been reported missing by his family days before the gruesome discovery. According to Rosa Yanchaguano, Jaime's sister, he was last seen on October 18th. Rosa told investigators that after her brother disappeared, Lisa called several times inquiring about him. Lisa claimed to have received a text message from Jaime where he mentioned that illegal substance traffickers were holding him captive and demanding a ransom of $8,000. She strongly warned Jaime's family not to contact the police. This claim became a crucial point in a complex investigation as detectives sought to solve the tragedy and uncover if there were any other hidden victims. During her interrogation, Lisa revealed that in 2020, while working at a cookie factory, she met Jaime Yanchaguano. According to her, they became friends. Lisa wanted to return to her husband, who allegedly planned to blackmail Jaime for money. David made it clear to Lisa that if she did not help him, he would divorce her. Later, David gave Lisa a white powder and told her to put it in Jaime's food. Once she did, Jaime fell asleep and never woke up. Realizing what had happened, Lisa, in desperation, tried to win back her husband, but failed. In her despair, she ingested the same poison and gave it to her children. However, the poison did not have the expected effect on her, and she sought help from her neighbors to save herself from the horror that had befallen her children. Following her testimony, investigators launched a thorough investigation, but no evidence of David's involvement was found. No one close to the couple could have foreseen that Lisa Maria and David Acosta's lives would take such a tragic turn. When they met, Lisa was only 16 years old and still in high school, a dreamy and romantic girl, while David was a strong and determined young man. Their friendship quickly developed into strong feelings, leading to Lisa's unexpected pregnancy. Although their families disapproved of their relationship, David's parents supported their son and welcomed Lisa into their home. In difficult times, David's family provided genuine support to the young couple, even inviting Lisa to live with them to ensure she completed high school. When Lisa turned 18, the couple got married. 2 years later, they were expecting their second child, a daughter. David's parents decided to provide the young couple with their own home, giving them an apartment where they found a corner of family happiness. However, over time, their relationship began to deteriorate. Both spouses were unfaithful, leading to mistrust and disappointment. Their once boundless love began to weaken. Lisa also complained of psychological abuse from David, prompting her to seek help from the police. Eventually, she was granted a protective order, forcing David to leave the family home. At this point, Lisa began to blackmail David, demanding money for the chance to see their children. In early September 2020, Lisa's life took an unexpected turn when her eldest son began suffering from seizures. In desperation, she took him to the emergency room at Baca Ortiz Hospital. After stabilizing his condition, doctors conducted tests and diagnosed a focal form of epilepsy, a severe condition affecting a specific part of the brain. Doctors advised Lisa to undergo further tests, including MRIs, and to consult specialists urgently. However, Lisa ignored these recommendations. A month later, her son suffered another seizure, and they returned to the emergency room. Reviewing his medical history, doctors discovered Lisa had not followed their earlier advice, failed to complete tests, and had not seen specialists, leaving her son without necessary treatment. They warned her that continued neglect could lead to legal consequences. Despite the warnings, Lisa disregarded the medical advice. A few weeks later, after her son's condition resurfaced, she called David, who was alarmed by her serious tone. She informed him that a social worker would visit to discuss. To brighten the waiting time, Lisa offered him a drink. However, as David drank the drink, he suddenly felt unwell. His condition was worsening, and the social worker had not shown up. So David decided to go home to get something to deal with his discomfort. The next morning, David woke up in a terrible state. He could barely speak because his tongue was numb. Every step caused discomfort, and his eyes hurt. His parents insisted on calling an ambulance.
David was taken to the hospital where he spent several days. Tests revealed the presence of a psychoactive substance in his system, but given that he hadn't used anything of the sort, David began to speculate how this could have happened. Eventually, he speculated that perhaps someone had deliberately slipped him some substance in a public place. David was grateful for his life and realized that what had happened could have ended much worse. In early October 2020, Lissa made the decision to hire a nanny for her children. Her cousin Patricia recommended her friend Bertha, a responsible 48-year-old woman looking for work. On Monday, October 5th, Bertha arrived at the young mother's house. Lissa urged her to take a pill that she said helped prevent infection with the COVID-19 virus, an epidemic of which was at its height at the time. Claiming that it was a highly effective natural remedy, Lissa convinced Bertha to swallow the medicine and enter the house. They sat down to discuss the babysitter's childcare duties. A few minutes later, Bertha began to feel sick. She felt a headache. Her stomach began to upset, and eventually she vomited. A short while later, Patricia showed up. It turned out that she had called her cousin repeatedly, but Lissa didn't answer, which alerted Patricia. She decided to check what had happened and immediately went to her house. Upon entering, she found Bertha lying on the couch, who was practically fainting already. Lissa shared with her cousin what had happened and expressed concern. Learning that Lissa still had not called an ambulance, Patricia immediately did so herself. After a while, doctors arrived and sent Bertha to the hospital. The condition of the victim managed to stabilize. Doctors diagnosed poisoning with a toxic substance, which often happens when using various medications. Doctors decided that Bertha did not tolerate some component of the composition of the pills from COVID-19. A few months before this tragic incident, in June of the same year, Lissa's former buddy, Mark Escanto, had died of poisoning. At the time, the cause of his death had gone unnoticed. But now, given all these strange circumstances, Mark's case required additional attention. Investigators scrutinized the deceased's home and found Lissa's fingerprints on the glasses used the night before Mark's death. This fact added new evidence to the investigation, pointing to Lissa's possible involvement in the incident. But suddenly, a new accusation was made against Lissa. Her own family made a shocking report to the police. It turns out that on September 2nd, the family had a family gathering where Lissa offered to let everyone taste a drink of her own making. 7 brothers and sisters of the young woman, as well as their parents, drank the unknown drink and immediately felt sick. Fortunately, no one died, but the 56-year-old mother suffered a stroke. Lissa's father claimed that while the relatives were seeking medical attention, his daughter stole $1,300 from the house. Now the investigation included not only crimes against the children and a former boyfriend, but also an incident that jeopardized the lives and health of her own family members. As it turned out, that wasn't all. Investigators encountered another strange event. In May of that year, Jose Luis Erazo, a friend of Lissa's, was found dead in his home. A few days before, Jose had suddenly disappeared, and neighbors soon smelled a rotting odor, prompting them to contact the authorities. An examination of the body initially revealed nothing suspicious, and was ruled a heart attack. But one of Jose's sisters suspected something strange and hid a bottle of alcohol found in the refrigerator. In addition, Jose's family noticed that some items were missing from the house. It turned out that Lissa and Jose were friends, and when the guy died, the alleged killer contacted his relatives by phone. With a distraught voice, she stated that Jose owed her a large sum of money, and she had to contact the family to repay the debt. This cunning plan did not work, and a little later Lissa called Jose's family again, changing her voice to conceal her identity. Identifying herself as Jose's friend, she claimed that she was pregnant by him, and now had to apply for child support. Although Jose's family did not believe these stories, Lissa was not about to give up and made a third attempt to deceive them. She said she knew who was responsible for Jose's death and offered to meet to uncover the details. Had she not been arrested on charges of killing her own children in Jaime, the list of victims might have gotten longer. When the media reported the arrest of Lissa, who had poisoned 3 people, Jose's relatives understood. They immediately reported their suspicions to the authorities, and Jose's body was exhumed for forensic examination to determine the true cause of death.
The relatives were not mistaken. Traces of poison were found in the remains of the deceased. On December 22, 2020, a hearing was held for Lisa Maria Kaiser for the murder of her 2 children, whose names and photos were classified, and for Jaime Ianchaguano. The trial was conducted virtually due to restrictions related to the spread of the COVID-19 virus. Lisa had been in contact from a social rehabilitation center. The prosecutor's statement said that Lisa gave her children a toxic mixture of insecticides and anti-epileptic drugs. In interrogations, she claimed that she had grown desperate and could not leave her children with her husband David, who did not care for the children. In fact, she admitted that she wished them dead. At the end of the hearing, the judge issued the defendant a court pass and ordered her remanded into custody pending trial. The children's trial next took place in 2021 at the Pichincha Provincial Court. The prosecutor presented a set of evidence to prove Lisa's guilt. Among them were statements by David, who revealed the content of messages the wife had received on the eve of the tragedy. In one of the messages, she claimed that she would take with her what belonged to her, referring to the children. She said she didn't know where her children and herself would go, heaven or hell. But now she felt as if she was in hell. Lisa added that she doesn't expect her husband to forgive her, because she knows he hated her, and now he will hate her even more. David also spoke about his unstable relationship with his wife. At the hearing, the defendant's reconstructed testimony was presented, stating that she took 2 pills that day, called for help, and then passed out. According to the reconstruction conducted by the prosecutor's office, the daughter died while still in bed, and her older brother tried to take a few steps to call for help, but fell and died. The conclusion of the forensic medical examination was extremely clear. The children died as a result of a premeditated crime. The deaths were the result of suffocation caused by pulmonary edema and intoxication caused by a mixture of epilepsy medication and other unspecified substances, presumably insecticides and disinfectant. The prosecution also charged Lisa with the death of Jaime Ianchaguano, whose body was found bricked up in the kitchen. The perpetrator was also suspected of attempting to kill David and members of her own family. The hearing raised the issue of Lisa's irresponsible attitude to her son's health after being diagnosed with localized epilepsy. The mother ignored instructions for further tests and follow-up examinations, and when the boy was hospitalized again, his condition was exacerbated by her own mother's negligence. Warnings from medical professionals did not change her attitude toward her son's treatment, leading to a threatened termination of her parental rights. Lisa's mental health investigations revealed her to be highly emotional and environmentally dependent. She sought constant attention and understanding from others, and experienced severe anxiety when events did not unfold according to her plan. She also exhibited a tendency to self-harm. She attempted to say goodbye to her life at least 3 times, but was unsuccessful each time. Witnesses described her as insecure, attachment-seeking, exhibiting schizoid and erratic behavior. The findings of the psychological analysis also emphasized that on the day of the tragic events, Lisa acted with full awareness of her actions. After a long trial that lasted 10 months, Lisa Maria Kaiser was found guilty of the crime against her children. The Pichincha Provincial Court sentenced her to 34 years and 8 months imprisonment. In addition to this, she was ordered to pay David a compensation of more than $20,000. It was noted in the press that Lisa remained calm throughout the proceedings and only showed emotion when her children were mentioned. The Jaime Ianchaguano murder case, which began in August 2021, appeared to be unfinished. New details were revealed during the court hearings. Lisa admitted giving her friend a white substance mixed with alcohol, but claimed she got it from David. However, the investigation proved otherwise. According to a psychiatrist who interviewed Lisa, she did not want to take Jaime's life. She wanted to intimidate his family so she could then extort money. She did demand $8,000 as ransom. Experts called the plan disorganized, which ultimately led to the crime. In addition, forensic tests revealed that it wasn't that simple. Jaime was found to have poison in his system, and the cause of death was strangulation. The body was found with a shattered ribcage and wire around the neck. Lisa claimed that after her friend died, she decided to bury him under a back room and cement him in. The store owner's testimony confirmed that Lissa bought building materials during the days of Jaime's disappearance. After the parties' arguments, the prosecutor's office requested a new trial in April 2022. At that trial, an additional charge of extortion was filed. Lissa called Jaime's relatives, claiming he was being held by a group of gangsters, and demanded $8,000 for his release. The defense relied on the lack of conclusive evidence that Lissa was involved in Jaime's murder. Nevertheless, she was found guilty and received a 22-year prison sentence, as well as a sentence to pay $5,000 to the victim's mother. While Jaime's trial was underway, the investigation of Mark Escanto and Jose Luis Erazo, Lissa's alleged victims, was nearing completion. Mark Escanto was 48 years old, and tests conducted after his death revealed traces of the same substance that Lissa had given to her children. In addition, Mark was found to have severe inflammation of the stomach. The family's lawyer claimed that Lissa met Mark, offered him a beer, and then put the poison in the drink. A glass with Lissa and Mark's fingerprints, as well as a swab containing the woman's DNA, was provided to authorities. Alleged motives for the murder included jealousy and money. It is also known that Lissa had asked Mark to help her financially, and there is evidence that he loaned her at least $120. Mark was Lissa's first known victim. The final outcome of this case, as well as that of Jose Luis Erazo, remain unknown. They may not have been reported in the press, or the investigation may not yet have reached the stage of being formally charged and brought to trial. At the time of her brutal crimes, Lissa Maria was only 26 years old. Her high-profile criminal case has become one of the most horrific and disturbing in Ecuador's recent history. These crimes made her known throughout the country as Doña Venado. Lissa Maria Kaisi is recognized as a serial killer in Ecuador. Her victims have endured terrible suffering, and their relatives have suffered unbearable pain. The charges include 5 murders and 9 attempted murders. Under Ecuadorian law, the maximum sentence she could face is 40 years in prison. That means Lissa could be released when she turns 70 years old. It is still unclear what motivated Doña Venado to commit such horrific acts. Was her act the result of resentment for not getting what she expected in life? Many speculate that the motive was money, and in David's case, Lissa acted out of a lust for revenge, which led to the tragedy with her children. The most horrific part of this story is not only the number of victims left in the path of Doña Venado, but also the fate of 2 innocent children who could not have guessed that their mother, who gave them life, would take it away so absurdly and cruelly. Thanks for watching, guys. Jack was with you. Subscribe to the channel and don't forget to click the bell not to miss new stories from around the world. See you soon. Take care.